This is Atomic Scenery, and today I'm going to narrate second part of What If Naruto was trained by a forgotten clan. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Even though it was midnight, Naruto did not care. He sat by himself beneath the incomplete bridge and reflected on the events of the day, including the possibility that Hinata was dead, which still made him cry. He had been able to express his feelings to the girl, but only after she passed out. He repeatedly applied Kyuubi's chakra to his own chakra and caused the fox to burn, then threw it into the air and allowed it to explode at a low enough level to avoid drawing attention to himself. He had been under the bridge all day, so he was able to tell that Gato and his had been dealt with. This was due to both Zabuza and Inari, who gathered up the townspeople to assist in fighting Gato off. Naruto felt a little bit of pride and happiness before it vanished into thin air when he thought about Hinata's condition. He had a lot on his mind, and he was thankful that his mother had been searching for him, but, apparently, she was unable to locate him. He always believed that his mother and father had abandoned him because of Kyuubi, but now he knew that she was not even in the same place as him, and even if that wasn't enough, her reaction was more than enough. A mother wouldn't have reacted that way after seeing her child for the first time in a long time if she had abandoned him. He was truly happy that his mother did love him and cared for him. The reason Naruto thought his sensei was unreliable was because his own sensei knew who his father was and chose not to tell him. Even though he heard footsteps behind him, he didn't care. He simply waited for the person to reveal themselves so he could tell them he wanted to be alone. He did the fox fire again and threw it into the air to explode, but no matter how many times he wanted to think about his mother and his sensei's betrayal, Hinata's still body kept popping into his mind. Naruto.kun. Naruto got up quickly and turned to face Hinata, who appeared to be unaffected by anything, with a few bandages scattered here and there but nothing too serious. Naruto began to approach Hinata before bringing her in for a passionate embrace, causing her to blush and become unresponsive until she heard Naruto sobbing. "What's wrong, Naruto-kun?" she said, and Naruto choked back his tears and answered. "I simply can't cope with everything that's going on, Hinata. I discovered that my mother was the red-haired woman who attacked you. In addition, Kakashi Sensei was aware of my father's identity but kept it a secret from me." Naruto sobbed as he said, "And to top it all off, I thought you died." You believed I had passed away?" Hinata inquired, a little taken aback by his level of concern. "Yes, Hinata, I apparently thought you were dead because you didn't move after losing consciousness." "I felt terrible, Hinata, I felt like I died too," Naruto said sadly, and because of the shock she was experiencing, Hinata was unable to respond to his words. Naruto cared for her more than she thought he did, and without either of them realizing it, he pulled her body closer to his and wouldn't let her go. Hinata didn't notice, and even if she did, she wouldn't mind. She needed him and would put Naruto above all else. After finally recovering from her initial shock, she gave him a hug in return, and she whispered to Naruto that everything would be alright. They stayed that way for a while before Naruto pulled his head back and looked at Hinata, looking at her lavender moons, which he called eyes, with love and gratitude. Hinata stared into his eyes and was captivated by their color and emotion. Naruto then lowered his mask and drew his head closer to Hinata's, and she was wondering why his eyes were suddenly getting closer until she felt his lips lightly brush against hers. Hinata's entire body tensed up, which caused Naruto to back off Hinata, taking 2 steps back before turning his entire body. Naruto pulled up his mask and vanished into the night, saying, I'm sorry Hinata. Chan, I don't know what came over me." Hinata didn't move after Naruto left, and even then, she only raised a hand to her lips in shock. Impetuous. Foolish. As he emerged into the clearing where he usually goes to train covertly, Naruto began hammering his head in. As she sat back on a tree branch and gazed at the stars, Kushina said, "Be careful son. Any harder and I think you'll be able to knock yourself out." Naruto looked up in surprise, then calmed down and took a seat in the center of the clearing. Naruto gave him a painful blow to the head for saying, yeah, ow. Naruto observed Kushina sitting next to her son and gazing at the stars, and Kushina grinned when she saw her son doing the same. "I may have just remembered being your mother, but that doesn't mean you can run your mouth off on me. You also enjoy stargazing? I did it all the time back then, especially with your father," Kushina said, and she caught a glimpse of Naruto nodding his head out of the corner of her eye. Naruto instantly turned to face Kushina. "Can you tell me about his personality?" Naruto begged, and Kushina sighed as she turned to face him. "Well, he was a very sexy man. In fact, his stamina and strength was very impressive considering all the time we spent in his room." "Mom." Kushina merely laughed as Naruto yelled, cutting her mother off as she was giving him information he really didn't want to know. Naruto, he was a man of honor. I could go on for ages about being quiet, strong, smart, compassionate, and so on. When we first met, we didn't get along and in fact detested one another. Before he became well known, I began to like your father when I soon began to open up to him and he opened up to me. He made me anxious when he was around, and as time went on, I simply couldn't stop thinking about him. He happened to feel the same way when I abruptly confessed my love to him one day. I must admit, Naruto, I was extremely anxious. Kushina hesitated, and Naruto remained silent the entire time. I didn't know what he would say or even if he would accept my feelings. Naruto, I was fortunate. If anything, the person I loved me more than I did. In my life, that was the second happiest moment. It was a bad day, so it wasn't the happiest day. I fell into a mud puddle after tripping over a guy's foot on my way to tell him. A random guy groped me as I was getting up, so I beat the living daylights out of him. I chose to wash myself in a river rather than walk all the way to my apartment because I was muddy and my hair was in disarray. It was the second happiest moment of my life when I saw your father practicing there and thought, it's now or never. After I told him, he gave me a hug and then a kiss. Kushina took Naruto in her arms. What was the first happy moment in your life, if that was the second? With genuine interest, Naruto asked, and Kushina responded by kissing Naruto's forehead. Naruto gasped and then grinned, giving his mother a tight hug as she did the same. After a while, Naruto spoke again. It was the day the doctor told your father and you were a boy, she said affectionately. By the way, you never told me who my father is. You're correct. Your father was a very well-known individual, Naruto. His fangirls would have snatched him up if I hadn't. Kushina proudly declared, your father was none other than Konoha's Yellow Flash, Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage. Naruto was shocked to learn that his father was the fourth Hokage, the greatest Hokage in history, and his surprise quickly turned to rage. You're saying that my own father was the one who gave me Kyuubi? Naruto asked as he released his mother's embrace, and Kushina gave Naruto a sad look. I believe so, but I'm not positive. I wouldn't know because I was knocked unconscious during Kyuubi's attack. He informed me that he needed to help the village in some way. He could have taken you to a daycare, as far as I'm aware. I was so stressed out about giving birth to you that I hardly understood what was happening. After that, I made the decision to support the village until... Kushina paused and turned to face her son. Have you ever encountered a man with long, white hair? Kushina was extremely enraged when Naruto shook his head, but she decided to handle it at a later time. In any case, Naruto, please try not to get upset over your father's actions. She sighed and turned back to the sky, but before Naruto could notice it, an evil smirk appeared on her lips. If I know him like I think I do, he must have given up his life for the life of everyone in the village. Naruto nodded his head once more, both in understanding and to support Kushina's assumption. Hi, Naruto? Naruto was frightened when he looked up and saw Kushina's evil smile. Yeah, mother? Have you already found a girlfriend? She asked cunningly, and Naruto turned away, blushing beneath his mask. Haku, who had been searching for Naruto, happened to arrive just as Kushina asked him that question, and Naruto sheepishly replied, no. Haku nearly fell from the tree she was in, but Kushina simply gave her the thumbs up and grinned. Fortunately, Naruto was too embarrassed to notice any of these actions at this point. Well, you know, Kushina said, winking and glancing at the tree Haku was in. Haku isn't seeing anyone. Thanks, Mom. It was quite strange coming from him, but Naruto said meekly, I already like a girl. Who is it? Haku said, emerging from hiding. He wanted to hear him express his love for the girl with the raven hair, even though she already knew it. Yes, please tell us. Naruto reluctantly told them about Hinata, including how they met, how close they became, Kakashi's bell test, and how his earlier actions ruined the entire situation, Kushina said. After a moment of silence, Naruto wanted to change the topic, and now I'm afraid to even see her because she might not like me that way. Naruto ended unhappily, and Kushina and Haku exchanged glances, wondering if he was being negative or exaggerated. So, Mom, will you be coming home now that you know I'm your son? Kushina gazed at the stars, hoping they would respond to her. Before she could respond, the three heard a voice and saw Hinata leaping down from one of the trees encircling the clearing. Naruto's eyes widened, and he began to feel anxious. Hinata looked at Naruto with a similar nervous expression. May I just talk to you, Naruto-kun? Hinata asked shyly, and Naruto nodded his head, overcame his surprise, and got up to bid his mother good night before trailing behind Hinata farther into the woods. Kushina closed her eyes and sighed with relief. After what my son told me, am I really willing to return to Konoha? Kushina asked herself. While holding Naruto's hand, a miracle in and of itself, according to Naruto, they continued to walk through the woods, not speaking a word, their minds racing with ideas. Although Hinata was surprised she hadn't fainted yet, he knew she would if she lost her focus, and Naruto was as anxious as he would ever be. Under the moonlight, Hinata looked especially beautiful, and Naruto was beginning to lose his mind. In all the time he had been close to Hinata, his desire to kiss her had never been stronger than it was now. When they finally came to a halt in a lake that Naruto had never seen before, a particular memory caused Hinata's blush to deepen as she sat close to the lake and gazed up at the moon. Naruto sat down beside her and also watched the moon, waiting patiently for Hinata to speak, even though it took much longer than he had hoped. Hinata was just unsure of where to begin. Should she ask about Naruto's kiss or start with her confession? If she confessed and his kiss was only a one-time event, she would be devastated. Hinata's own self. Doubt was something that plagued her every day. She would have confessed to Naruto before during the academy, but his fangirls weren't very supportive, and her father wasn't very helpful either. All that training and criticism really took a toll on her self-esteem and self-image. She felt that she was the least attractive girl in her class and the last to get a boyfriend. The little confidence Hinata had to speak to Naruto alone vanished as these thoughts raced through her mind, and she got up, interrupting Naruto's stargazing as she stood and contemplated her next move. I'm sorry Naruto-kun. Naruto was about to inquire about the reason for her apology when he was saddened by the memory of their kiss. What I was going to ask you, I can't remember. Hinata, unable to contain her tears, said, I hope you can forgive me for wasting your time. Naruto saw this, got up, and approached Hinata. Why are you crying, Hinata-chan? Naruto asked as he gently pulled Hinata's face up. Hinata looked at Naruto's eyes and were enchanted by them before she blinked and backed away from Naruto. Hinata-chan. Hinata sobbed, I'm not good enough Naruto-kun. Naruto was obviously perplexed by this, but it didn't stop him from consoling his friend, the word friend reverberating in his mind. Hinata-chan, what do you mean, for what is it not good enough? Hinata looked up at Naruto, tears trailing down her cheeks as he asked. For anything. She halted when she felt warm lips lightly brush against her own, and her eyes widened before she closed them, put her arms around Naruto's neck, and kissed him back. Naruto was taken aback, but he didn't give it much thought, and he was relieved that he had taken off his mask before kissing her because it would have ruined the entire kiss. They both paused to catch their breath, and Naruto spoke before Hinata asked him anything. Hinata, stop talking like that. Hinata was taken aback when Naruto begged, please don't, I don't like to hear you talk like that. What, Naruto-kun? Hear me out, Hinata-chan. Naruto took a deep breath and then exhaled, saying, Hinata-chan, it's true what you said. You're not pretty, or smart, or whatever else you were going to say. Before Naruto spoke again, Hinata was upset and wanted to die. All of those things are inferior to you. Your beauty does not make you pretty. You are incredibly intelligent, but that doesn't make you smart. You are better than that, so you are not what you were going to say. Hinata was unable to speak, and when Naruto told her all of this, she was in complete shock. Her crush, the boy of her dreams, told her she was smart, attractive, and much more. It was like a dream come true. Hinata-chan, I want you to know something. Well, I didn't say a single thing when I told you that I believed you were dead. After you passed out. I said I love you. Naruto released Hinata and stepped back, keeping his head down and his back to her, not wanting to see or hear her reaction to the news. It was amazing that Hinata hadn't fainted yet, as she took in what Naruto had told her and her face turned a deeper shade of red. Naruto said, but I was foolish to think someone as great as you would ever want to go out with an outcast orphan like me. Hinata remained motionless, and when she did, it was only to cover her mouth. Then, to Naruto's surprise, she was giving him a back hug. Hinata-chan, Naruto-kun, you have my love, this time, Hinata yelled, and Naruto was so shocked that he didn't even breathe. He wanted to turn and give her a hug in return, kiss her until one of them passed out from lack of breath, and hold her to make sure nothing would hurt her, but he couldn't because his body wouldn't move and his mind shut down. When Hinata didn't get a response from him, he wondered what was wrong, so she let him go and moved in front of him. Naruto felt cold for a moment before realizing Hinata was standing in front of him. Naruto-kun. Silently, Hinata inquired. Hinata-chan, are you being honest with me? Naruto asked earnestly, and Hinata simply gave him another hug and did something she never would have imagined she could do. She kissed him. Naruto was the one who didn't respond until something suddenly occurred to him, and he gave Hinata a passionate kiss in return. My name is Naruto.kun. The day you rescued me from the second attempt to capture me by the Kumo ninja, I developed a crush on you. Naruto was stunned, unable to comprehend how someone could be as patient as Hinata had been. From that day on, it progressed until I realized that I didn't simply have a crush on you, I loved you, Hinata said, her stutter barely audible. You. Did you like me that long? As Hinata timidly nodded her head, Naruto asked incredulously, but how can you be so sure? What are you saying? Hinata inquired. How, after all, can you be certain that you love me? It wasn't until I believed you were dying that I realized I loved you. The heartache and emptiness I experienced only strengthened my love for you. How do you know? He sat close to her, and she leaned on him, her head resting on his shoulder as she looked up at him. He blushed, and Hinata giggled, which made Naruto's heart race. Hinata sat down and gestured for Naruto to sit next to her. My mother taught me what love is because of Naruto. To Naruto's delight, Hinata took hold of her arm and wrapped it around her waist. She told me that love is a feeling you get when you're with someone special to you, Naruto said. You value this person more than everyone else, she told me. That spending time with someone is like heaven, and spending time apart is like hell. You would even risk your life for that individual. And Naruto.kun, that's how I feel. That's how I feel about you, Hinata said, smiling sweetly and affectionately at Naruto. Naruto could see the love in her eyes and hear the honesty in her words, and he was certain that she wasn't lying and that he felt the same way. Before reclaiming her lips, Naruto said, I feel the same way, Hinata. Chan, I swear I do. Hinata's soft, sweet lips were heaven to Naruto, and he felt that no amount of free ramen or acceptance from his village could compare to what he was doing at that moment. Hinata had never felt happier in her life, and she didn't believe that happiness could be achieved after her mother's death. The moon shone brightly over them as Naruto and Hinata lay back against the ground, both of them lying on the cold ground. When they finally parted, Naruto kissed Hinata's forehead one last time before closing his eyes. Holding Hinata closer to his body, Naruto said, Good night, Hinata. Time. Before falling asleep, Hinata smiled at his words and cradled his chest with her cheek. They both fell asleep after saying, Good night, Naruto.kun. They both dreamed of a better tomorrow with the people they were holding. That's really adorable. As she and Haku watched the two geniuses sleep in each other's arms, Kushina remarked, My son's a charmer, just like Minato was. Haku smiled slightly and patted her back, reassuring her, Don't be upset, Haku. Chan. I'm sure there's someone out there for you. I'm sure of it too, Kushina.san. With the help of Zabuza and Kushina, as everyone calls her, Team Kakashi and Team Kurenai trained Naruto and helped him improve his swordsmanship over the course of the days. They did, however, require him to use replacement swords because he broke his old ones. Everyone else had completed the tree climbing exercise successfully and was now sparring, while half the teams continued to protect Tazuna while the other half trained or rested. Haku had been having internal conflicts since the night she witnessed Naruto and Hinata confess their love for one another. She didn't know what she was feeling, but it was a negative emotion, one she didn't want to deal with, and the training with Naruto wasn't helping her emotions stay in line. It got worse when he took off his shirt. Every emotion she felt was starting a civil war inside of her, and it took all of her willpower not to charge Naruto and kiss him. On this specific day, Haku threw her senbon needles with the intention of disabling the young genin. Haku stopped throwing her senbon needles and pondered for a while, blushing at the thought. She had no idea she was capable of such thoughts. Naruto questioned why Haku had stopped throwing her senbon so abruptly. Hey, what happened, Haku? Bring Haku out of her reverie, Naruto screamed. She watched, but did nothing. Naruto sighed and approached Haku. What happened, Haku? You stopped throwing senbon at me, but why? Haku's hand then shot off and swiftly removed his mask, and she slammed her lips onto Naruto's. Naruto didn't even have time to react. He had his eyes wide open and didn't move. Haku had her eyes closed, and for a moment, she felt sweet and utter bliss. As strange as that sounded, Naruto needed to know, as it's in his nature to be curious. Haku. What the devil? Haku sobbed into her hands as she broke down. I apologize, Naruto. I was unable to resist. Between sobs, Haku said, I just don't know what I'm feeling anymore. Kushina and Zabuza, who were overseeing the training, were unable to comment at the moment because they were both too shocked to contribute anything to the conversation. When Kushina eventually composed herself, she held Haku and instructed Naruto to go to the house, telling Zabuza to accompany him. No way. Fine, let's go, brat. Zabuza responded, feeling Kushina's murderous intent, but he wasn't afraid. Pay attention, I have a name. They could be heard arguing as they proceeded to Tazuna's house. Naruto yelled, apparently having recovered from his shock rather quickly. Kushina said, all right, Haku-chan, tell me what you meant. Sitting outside Tazuna's house, Kiba, Hinata, and Sasuke watched the ocean waves rush out of the water, only to hit the shore and dissolve. Sasuke simply closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair, while Kiba sat too close to Hinata for her comfort. How are you doing, Hinata? Hinata tensed up and wanted to back away, but she was sitting at the edge of the bench, and the only way out was to climb over Kiba, which she didn't want to do. Kiba said casually as he put his arm around her shoulder. Kiba leaned down until his mouth was only a few centimeters away from Hinata's ear and said, I've been okay, Kiba. Hinata unconsciously shuddered at Kiba's tone as he said, I can help you become better. Kiba then moved his head close to Hinata and nearly kissed her before something stopped him. When Kiba looked up, he saw an angry looking Naruto standing next to an intimidating Zabuza, who was beginning to like the dog boy more and more every day. Zabuza had a smirk on his face as he watched the dog boy perspire and cower under Naruto's killer intent. Kiba, what do you suppose you're doing? When Naruto softened his murderous intent, Kiba gathered himself and got up to approach him. Hinata and Sasuke watched with curiosity, curious to see how it would all work out. Naruto said calmly, making Kiba flinch. Why is there an issue? Although he wasn't given all the details, Zabuza had heard of Naruto and Hinata confessing their love for one another, and now the mutt had essentially called into question the brat's feelings. A sly smile emerged beneath his bandages, and Zabuza watched with laughter. If he had an eyebrow, he would have cocked it by now. Yes, there is dog. Breath. It's not like she's your girlfriend. Naruto was about to respond, but he was unable to do so. Kiba was correct. Although they spent more time together, they never discussed it, so that didn't prove they were a couple, did it? Choosing to find out, Naruto suddenly materialized in front of Hinata, holding her hand and glaring at her. Would you like to go out with me, Hinata? Naruto inquired, and to Kiba's dismay, Hinata immediately planted another kiss on Naruto's lips. The key word here is, temporarily, because 5 seconds later, Hinata fainted in Naruto's arms. Naruto sighed before picking her up and carrying her into the house. Yes, Naruto, I would. Naruto and Hinata hugged, with Naruto temporarily forgetting his anger and Hinata temporarily forgetting her shyness. Everyone, including Zabuza, was extremely relieved when the bridge was finished, and as they crossed it, Inari paused Naruto to speak with him. I just wanted to say thank you, Naruto. I'm sorry for how I behaved when we first met, and I appreciate you giving me in the town hope again. Naruto grinned down at Inari and tousled his hair. A member of the town shouted out as Naruto rejoined his group and they continued walking. No problem, Inari, and remember, I wasn't the only one who fought here. Inari grinned as she glanced at the other members of Naruto's group. What will we call the bridge, then? In response, Tazuna said. The Great, however, Inari thought differently. Many people agreed with Inari when she said, the Great Ninja Bridge. Tazuna grinned and ruffled Inari's hair. You mean the Great Ninja Bridge? That name sounds fantastic. Following her conversation with Kushina, Haku discovered that she didn't like Naruto and simply wanted to be comforted in the same way that he had comforted Hinata. Kushina, Zabuza, Kakashi, and Kurenai were all discussing their plans and what to do, while the Demon Brothers, well, were just bored. Back with Team Kakashi, Team Kurenai, and Team Kushina, a contentious name on Zabuza's part, all walked in silence. Team Kushina abruptly halted, drawing the attention of the others. Zabuza said, well, this is where we part, for now. Haku and the Demon Brothers approached him, but Haku chose not to accompany them. Haku? Zabuza inquired, and Haku turned away before turning back to face him. In fact, I wanted to know if you would allow me to travel to Konoha with Naruto and the others, Zabuza. Sama. Zabuza growled but continued to consider it after Haku begged, and Kushina followed him and gave him a backslap. Zabuza growled again, come on eyebrows, let the girl go. Haku gave Zabuza a final embrace, but this time, Zabuza returned the hug, glaring at everyone when he heard a chorus of, "Oh. Fine, but I better not find out you've been slacking on your training, Haku." Glad to be free of the teary-eyed expressions, Zabuza hurriedly left with the Demon Brothers, and Naruto was overjoyed when Kushina didn't go either. So, Mom, you're joining us at home? When Naruto asked, Kushina simply shrugged and began to follow Team Kakashi and Kurenai to Konoha. However, in the middle of their journey, Kushina stopped when Naruto's broken swords appeared. Anyway, Naruto, what made your swords so unique? When Kushina inquired, Naruto explained that they were made during his year. long training with Ymir and that the metal needed to make the sword was located in Ymir's homeland rather than Konoha, estimating that it would likely take a month to get there. Kushina considered the situation before making a decision. "Hey Naruto, how about we head over there and pick up some new swords for you?" Kushina remarked. "I'm sure we'll be fine by ourselves, and your team can probably handle 2 to 3 months without you." Naruto gave his mother's offer careful thought, weighing the advantages of having new swords and strengthening his relationship with his mother against the disadvantage of not seeing Hinata for more than 2 months. Hinata could tell what was on his mind and why he hadn't responded to Kushina because of his thoughtful expression and the way he continued to look at her. "I'll be alright. Naruto-kun. Please accompany your mother to buy new swords." "We'll be fine," Hinata said, "so hold my hands." Naruto took another moment to nod his head, then raised her hands and kissed them. Hinata blushed at his gesture, and her blush deepened when he kissed her in front of everyone. He broke it off, much to her dismay, which was visible on her face. Naruto laughed and gave Hinata another hug before he and his mother left Konoha. As Naruto moved farther away from Hinata, she watched in sadness until she felt a hand touch her shoulder and looked up to see it was Kakashi. "Sensei." In an attempt to console the enamored genin, Kakashi said, "Don't worry about him, Hinata. I'm sure he'll come back in one piece." Haku also put her hand on Hinata's other shoulder. Hinata nodded her head and they resumed their walk back to Konoha. "Yes Hinata, I'm also sure he will return." After a month. After arriving at the weaponsmith's house, which Naruto told her he visited when he first arrived, they spent the entire month walking until they were exhausted, at which point they would either spar or have Kushina train him. When neither of them felt like doing either, they talked about their pasts. Occasionally Hinata would appear, and Kushina could only listen with delight as he talked endlessly about the girl. "Hey, are you still here, old man?" A man with brown hair, blue eyes, a mustache, and a beard emerged from the tiny shack where he lived, wearing a sleeveless muscle shirt, long pants, a studded leather apron, and armbands. In hindsight, this man was extremely intimidating and ought to have been treated with the respect that he deserved, but an anxious Kushina didn't ignore this fact when she took one good look at Naruto and his face lit up with joy, instantly calming her fears. "What has brought you to my modest home, my good friend Naruto?" Although Kushina was still cautious of the giant man, she followed Naruto into his house as he said this and offered the two travelers some shelter. The giant man gave Naruto a calculating look as he said, "Well, I have horrible news. My swords were damaged beyond repair and I was hoping a man of your stature would be able to make me a new one. The sword I made for you is challenging to make, and the metal alone is rather expensive. I don't know Naruto. Are you able to cover the cost of it in my services?" The giant man, Yeba Tsukirite, asked. Naruto tensed, remembering that he had given the little girl and her mother all of his money, and hung his head in defeat. Naruto said, "No." Kushina was determined not to let their trip be ruined by a lack of funds, so she took out nearly all of her money and gave it to Yeba. "Is that sufficient?" Kushina asked impatiently, and Yeba grinned after counting the money. Yeba got up, leaving an ecstatic Naruto and a shocked Kushina in his living room, and said, "With this, I could be able to make your sword 10 times stronger than it was before. You may stay here as you wait for your sword to be made. Naruto. Make yourself at home because it will take me a day or two to make it." "I'm grateful, Mom." As one idea took over Kushina's mind, Naruto yelled. "I didn't think he would take it all." 3 hours later, Hinata and Sasuke were back in Konoha, waiting for Kakashi to show up at their training location, but he wasn't by himself. "Hello guys," Kakashi said, with Haku trailing behind. Sasuke and Hinata saw this but didn't give it any attention. Sasuke said, "You're late." Kakashi made a feeble excuse, saying, "Sorry, but I got lost in the road of life." Hinata remarked, "You already used that 1K Kakashi, sensei." Sasuke added, "Besides, I thought Naruto told you to take a map last time." Kakashi noticed this and changed the topic, which made Hinata sad that Naruto was still gone. When Kakashi said, "Anyway, I called you here because I want to introduce to you your replacement for Naruto, Haku." Sasuke arched an eyebrow and Hinata stumbled over her own feet. Fearfully, Hinata said, But Kakashi. Sensei, it's not like Naruto-kun will be gone forever." She hoped she wouldn't have to take back what she had said. "Hinata, that is accurate, but this is just a short-term situation. After Naruto returns, Haku will be promoted to Chunin. You three will be cooperating and completing D-rank missions until then." Haku and the rest of the team all started to perspire, and Kakashi grinned as he observed their response. His team groaned as he said, "Great, now come on, I'm sure Tora has escaped by now." Kakashi added, "I love being in charge." A week or so later, Hinata has a sudden, uneasy feeling that something bad has happened to Naruto. She had no idea what it was, but she prayed that he would be okay. After a month and a half, it was rather uneventful. Some merchants came into the village to sell their wares, and a couple of tourists entered as well. Iruka Amino, a teacher and Chunin to his wonderful village. The village hidden in the leaf, was not a teacher today. Rather, he was a regular Chunin assigned to guard the front gates with fellow Chunin Katetsu Higane. Iruka sighed as he lay back on his chair and reflected on the graduating class of the previous year, specifically one blonde-haired child wearing a mask. When Iruka asked Kakashi where Naruto was, he was told it was a secret. Iruka had been patient until 5 weeks ago, when his self-control started to wane. He had heard about his C-rank mission turning a rank, and when Kakashi returned, they informed him that Naruto didn't arrive with him, but another girl did. In the distance, a limply figure was approaching Konoha, seemingly dragging something, and wearing a black cloak that completely obscured their body, including their face. The figure appeared intent on reaching Konoha, not pausing for anything, and moving at a steady pace, though they were still quite a distance from entering Konoha. When the person heard the sounds of ninjas jumping in the background, it turned and waved to get their attention, and they continued to curse and complain about their luck. A solemn boy with raven hair, a light blue Chinese shirt, and blue Anbu pants, as well as a girl with long brown hair tied in a ponytail, midnight blue hair, a thick tan sweater, and dark blue capri pants followed a silver-haired man wearing a mask over his face and dressed in the traditional Konoha Junin attire as he leapt out of the trees. The Junin with the silver hair moved ahead of his group. "Ma'am, do you need assistance?" said the Junin. The cloaked figure, who sounded like a lady, said feebly, "Cut the crap, Kakashi, and help me get back to Konoha." "Oh, and who could you be?" Kakashi's eyes widened in recognition as the cloaked woman collapsed to one knee and used the enormous sword she was dragging as support. "Kushina." As he pulled off Kushina's hood, Kakashi inquired, seeing only pain and despair on her face. "Where is Naruto and what's wrong, Kushina?" In response to Kakashi's urgent words, Hinata hurried to Kushina and assisted her in standing up. Kushina passed out, her heartbeat beginning to wane and her chakra low. Kakashi picked her up, and Team Kakashi hurried to Konoha's hospital. After a day, Kushina woke up to the sound of a bothersome beeping, which she wished would stop so she could sleep again, and when she opened one eye, she noticed a white ceiling, wondering why she had seen it when she had no memory of falling asleep or even of what had happened after. Kushina began to panic and wanted to scream, but instead she picked up her giant sword and began swinging wildly, slicing all wires, tubes, and screens in half, and would have cleanly sliced a doctor if they hadn't been on lunch break. Kushina jumped to her feet and looked around, searching for a specific someone. "Where is my son? Where is Naruto?" Doctors quickly began rushing in and attempting to calm Kushina down after he yelled, alerting everyone in the hospital and, surprisingly, half of Konoha. "You dare not touch me, now." She would have followed, but a cloud of smoke surrounded the room, so Kushina put up her defenses and waited for the people to come forward. "Is someone going to tell me where my son is at, or do I have to help refresh your memories?" Kushina threatened. A lot of time has passed. 2 Anbu stood behind the third Hokage as he said, "Kushina. An elderly man? Why in the world are you here?" After Kushina asked, the third gestured for the Anbu to stand guard at the door and instructed him to keep everyone out. The third turned back to Kushina as they exited the room. "Kushina, do you know where you are?" Kushina glanced around before turning back to him as if he were a moron. "In a medical facility? All right, but which village?" "Look, old man Hiruzen, I have to find Naruto right away. I don't have time to play 20 questions. When Hiruzen, the third Hokage, intervened, Kushina was about to leave the hospital after making a huge X with her foot and kicking the wall, causing it to fall down and send her flying. Kushina let out a defeated sigh and started to speak, but Hiruzen interrupted him once more, saying, "We need to know what happened first." Kushina reluctantly agreed and looked down, saying, "After we summon his teammates, I don't want you to repeat what you're about to tell us." She growled when she saw that she had changed into the hospital gown, grabbed her old clothes from the chair next to the bed, and went to the bathroom to change. Hiruzen then gave his Anbu instructions to call Team Kakashi into his office, and Hiruzen and Kushina proceeded to his office. As Team Kakashi walked to the Hokage's office, they had no idea what to anticipate, and they were extremely anxious after encountering Kushina without Naruto. As they entered the Hokage's office, they noticed an irritated Kushina clutching her sword more tightly, and she looked up and snapped. "You all should have arrived by now. Naruto might have been dead or lying in a ditch somewhere while you were strolling by." Kushina, who was different from most, sighed and told Tryon to calm down as Hinata blanched with pain that most people missed. "I'm sorry Hinata, I'm just worried," Hiruzen said, "please take a seat so we can begin." After Haku and Hinata had taken their seats in the office's 2 chairs, Hiruzen nodded his head in Kushina's direction, telling her to start. "Okay. Well, I guess I should start from the beginning." Rewind. After Yaiba finished making Naruto's new swords, he and Kushina were walking back to Konoha. Naruto tested his new swords and discovered that they were sharper and could cut through more material than his old sword. He also realized that he needed to strengthen his body in order to handle his sword more effectively, so he had new weights on his arms. The cool thing about them was that the more chakra you added to them, the more weight you would get, and when you released the chakra, the weight would decrease, and the chakra would return to the user in full, preventing chakra depletion. On the way back, Kushina and Naruto were discussing a new training plan with him and his team as they passed a rocky area on a massive mountain close to Kumogakure. Kushina sensed that someone was observing them, and then a massive avalanche of rocks collapsed, heading straight for them. Kushina managed to jump out of the way, but Naruto was not so lucky. After tripping and catching his foot beneath a rock, Naruto looked up to see the rocks rolling in his direction. At the last second, he decided to cover his head and wait for the rocks. Kushina could have saved him, but it was too late. She managed to extricate Naruto from beneath the rocks, unconscious but still breathing, and she thanked God that her little boy was okay while kissing the top of his head. However, a number of Kumo hunter nins appeared and surrounded her and Naruto, so Kushina cursed her luck and growled, realizing that fate would be against her. "You are wanted for the attempt on the life of the Mizukage, Hikari Kurorugi. Every hidden village wants you, and Kumo would greatly benefit from your bounty," 100.nin said. "You can either come peacefully or we could kill you now." Kushina's rage was beginning to boil over. "All right, I understand." Another 100.nin made the grave error of slicing the other one in half while holding Kushina's sword tightly in her hands. "Perhaps we can ask your son there what we should do." "Would you like to ask my son what he should do?" When Kushina asked this question in a dangerously low voice, the 100.nin reset jumped on her and tried to kill her with the kunai or senbon needles in their hands. Kushina simply swung her sword, killing over 3/4 of the hunter nins, while the others jumped back. The first 100.nin nodded his head at his lone surviving comrade and made some hand signals before extending his hand to Kushina. Lightning technique. Jutsu with lightning needles. Unable to react quickly enough, Naruto's body was pushed back and sent over the cliff. Kushina watched helplessly as her son fell and reached the ground, but she was unable to see how he landed or whether he landed at all because of the trees surrounding the ground. Lightning seemed to strike the hunter nin's hands before shooting off to her. She blocked it with her sword, but it knocked her back. Then she rose and retrieved her sword. "How? I'll drop my son if you dare." After a tiring 10 minutes of combat, Kushina managed to decapitate the final 100.nin after yelling as she sliced the second one in half, leaving the captain alive. In her rage, she simply attacked the ninja viciously, not caring that he occasionally scratched. Kushina searched all over for Naruto after she descended the mountain, but it was in vain. She couldn't find him. She searched frantically for her son, and after a month, they were split up again. At last, she lost it and broke down in tears, crying until the sun began to set. She knew that crying wouldn't help, and since she couldn't find his body, there was a chance that he was still alive. After getting up and getting herself together, she started running as quickly as she could in the hopes of obtaining a search team to assist her in finding Naruto in Konoha. Flashback end. As the rest of the Kakashi team lamented the loss of a valuable teammate, Hiruzen looked down and silently prayed for the young genin. Kushina yelled at everyone in the room. Hinata was crying by this point and wasn't sure when she would stop. "What on earth are all of you doing? You see, he's not dead. If I don't see his body, then he's either up and running or healing himself," she screamed. "In any case, he is still alive." Now, with Hinata still in tears over the death of her first and last love, Kushina said, "I think we should send a search team out for him, myself included." After 4 months. "So, why did you bring us here just to be late, Kakashi? Sensei?" Once more, after learning of Naruto's disappearance, Hinata has become even more reclusive than Sasuke. She would participate in missions and team training and even surpass her previous performances, but only because she knew Naruto would never forgive her if she ever quit. As her performances improved, her social life dwindled, and she simply sat off on the side, unresponsive to anyone. "So, I was wondering if any of you would like to take the Chunin exam. What are your thoughts?" He handed them out to his team and instructed them to turn them in at the beginning of the exams. Hinata filled out her application, folded it, and placed it in her sweater pocket. She brushed her hair out of her face and left. Team Kakashi looked at each other before each shrugged and nodded their heads. Kakashi only perspired at their excitement. Hinata's long hair was another change. She had kept it short for Naruto because she knew he liked it that way, but now it was long, a continual symbol of her grief, and she had no one left to look nice for. Hinata ran into a slightly older child on her way home, so she stepped back and avoided him and the girl with the blonde hair next to him. The other child was still not pleased with Hinata's passive apology, so he snarled and spun her around while holding onto her shirt when she said, "Sorry." "Yes, you ought to apologize. You nearly caused my fall," the child with the purple paint on his face said, and before Hinata could respond, she looked at the bandaged object on his back and wondered what it was. The other kid became even more enraged and cocked his fist back, letting it go, and Hinata didn't even blink when she saw that a sheathed sword had stopped his fist by blocking his entire arm. See Wizard Kensai Muguruma's picture to see how his hair looks like. He had the darkest blue eyes Hinata had ever seen, and he had a long cloak that covered his entire body, resembling Shino's sweater. His cloak was brown and covered his entire body, and the only other thing she could notice about this enigmatic aide was that he wore black ninja shoes and had another sword underneath his cloak. "We shouldn't fight before the Chunin exams begin, in my opinion," the silver-haired ninja added. "Besides, hitting a girl is rude." The man with the purple paint on his head merely sneered and released Hinata. "How about I strike you then?" He swore and cocked his fist back again, but he stopped when he saw the silver-haired kid's team arrive behind him. One of them was a girl about his blonde teammate's height, with dark brown hair that reached the small of her back. Her skin was tanner than the silver-haired kid's, and she wore the same cloak, but it was lighter brown than his. Her Kumo armband gleamed from the sun's rays, and her light brown eyes were glaring at the purple-faced ninja. His other teammate was a little more intimidating. He was as tall as his silver-haired teammate, with long coal-black hair in a ponytail that reached down at the small back. He had the strangest eye color, a golden yellow. His skin pigments appeared healthy, though he was not as dark as his teammates. His cloak was a midnight blue on the outside and dark blood red on the inside. He had a strong-looking jaw and, as far as anyone could tell, an athletic body. He stared at the purple-faced ninja who dared to speak. The male teammate of the silver-haired kid said, "How about you walk away from us before I do something I might regret?" His eyes flashed, sending a chill down the other ninja's spine. The silver-haired kid then chose to speak again. "The other member of your team wouldn't want that, would he?" Suddenly, a red-haired boy who appeared to have never fallen asleep appeared as the sand began to spin around an area next to the blonde Kuinochi. The red-haired boy told Suna Konkuro, "Stop making fun of the Suna Konkuro, you're embarrassing your homeland." Konkuro began to say, "Gaara, it's not my fault," but was cut off. "Konkuro, stop talking or I'll make sure your mouth never opens again." Before passing the enigmatic Kumo team, Gaara said, "We need to get going, Konkuro, Tamari." The blonde-haired Kunoichi simply stayed silent so as not to enrage Gaara further. Gaara halted and responded to the silver-haired child when the Kumo ninja said, "Wait. What's your name?" Did he ask? "And yours, Gaara of the desert?" Gaara inquired. Takeo said, "My name's Takeo Ryusaki." Gaara gave a little grin and turned to leave. Gaara said before vanishing, "You are an interesting ninja, Takeo." Takeo turned to face Hinata, who was still on the ground, and he extended his hand, which she accepted. "Are you okay?" Untrusting her voice, Hinata simply nodded. Both teammates nodded when Takeo said, "Good, come on guys, we should be going to our hotel." However, before they departed, Takeo glanced at Hinata, who was still holding his hand. "What's your name?" Takeo inquired, and Hinata uttered a single word. Under his cloak, Takeo grinned and leaned down to kiss her hand, causing her face to blush slightly. After she released her hand, Takeo's smile widened. Hinata. "You mean it's sunny? I'll see you in sunshine, though," Takeo remarked as he and his group made their way back to the hotel. Hinata muttered, "Kumo ninjas." Something told her that this was going to get interesting, and she shook it off, walking home and waiting for the Chunin exams to begin tomorrow. It was strange for her to see a Kumo ninja save her after they had attempted to kidnap her twice. Hinata was already running late on the exam day. In the hopes that her teammates wouldn't mind her being a few minutes late, she was rushing to the academy. Not that she wanted her father to lecture her about how he expected her to pass, she just didn't want to be late. She pretended to be listening while blocking out the majority of it. She was already late and hurrying out of the house when he finally let her go. She stopped as she ran across Ichiraku's. A tiny tear formed in her eye as she turned to face it again. She dismissed it and grinned at her recollections of Naruto. She particularly recalled the occasion when she stayed with Naruto to do the dishwashing. She saw Takeo and his two teammates pass the ramen bar before she could finish thinking about it. It was strange for Hinata. She wanted to despise and fear them, at least because of Kumo's earlier attempts, but she was unable to do so for some reason. She kept going to the academy even though she didn't really want to speak with them. Sunshine. But unfortunately, as Sunshine turned around, she saw Takeo sprinting over with his teammates in tow. He paused in front of Hinata and grinned broadly. Takeo said, "Hey Sunshine, how you been?" Though her heartbeat stayed steady, Hinata felt her blood rush to her face, giving her a slight flush. Despite wondering why she was blushing, she chose to respond to Takeo first. Takeo simply waved her away after saying, I've been fine, thank you Takeo-san. Hinata returned to her anxious practice of pointing her index fingers together and said, "Don't add these in, Takeo is fine. Anyways, where you headed off to?" Hinata gave a trembling response, I'm going to go take the Chunin exams, but she was concerned about that. What's causing my anxiety? Hinata let out an unintelligible gasp. Am I fond of Takeo? Hinata gave herself a mental shake. Takeo's shoulder shake jolted her out of her reverie. I only have one person that I like, and he'll always be the only one. Huh? I said that was great and I went on saying that I wish you luck. Takeo replied. Hinata's red flush deepened into a deeper hue. Hinata was given a calculating look by Takeo's female teammate as she approached her. Though Hinata didn't care, she said, "She looks tough but she could be better." Takeo gave his teammate a scowl. Takeo defended Hinata by saying, "Come on Nozomi, don't be like that. Of course anyone could be better, but you didn't have to put it like that." While walking close to Hinata, his other teammate gave her a calculating look as well. "It's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Cross Xavier, I am both Takeo's and Nozomi's teammates. I hope these two children haven't bothered you." Cross replied. Takeo released Hinata's shoulders and glared at Cross. Nozomi also glared at Takeo as he asked, "What did you say?" Cross asked mockingly, "I'm sorry, adults. There, is that better?" When Takeo heard Hinata trying to contain a giggle, he raised his fist but stopped. He grinned repeatedly at her. With a loud voice, Takeo exclaimed, "There you go, Sunshine, glad to see you're happy." Cross laughed, and Takeo heard it. Takeo asked, "What's so funny?" Instead, Cross continued to laugh until he stopped. Infuriating his silver-haired teammate, Cross responded, "Nothing, but I just figured out you're an idiot." Takeo straightened up and confronted Cross directly. Takeo shouted, "What did you just say?" Cross simply grinned. Cross said as he made his way to the academy, "Now I think you're an idiot and deaf. Let's go, I don't want to be late for the Chunin exams." Hinata was laughing at the jokes that Takeo and Cross were making. In a way, it brought to mind the teasing between Sasuke and Hinata whispered, "Naruto-kun," as all of her joy left her body. "You say something Sunshine?" Takeo inquired, his voice full of worry. After a brief moment of looking up, Hinata shook her head and followed Cross's path. Takeo hurried to catch up with her on foot. Takeo inquired inquisitively, "So from what I can see, you're from this place aren't you?" In response, Hinata said, "Why? Yes. Cool, I always thought this was a cool place. Hey, do they have? Damn, what is it called? Ramen?" asked Takeo. Hinata cocked an eyebrow in his direction. "Yes. Why do you ask?" Hinata inquired, wondering why he was interested. He simply placed his hands behind his head and shrugged his shoulders. Despite Nozomi's sudden murderous intent, Takeo said, "This guy once told me about it. It's supposed to be really good or something. He seemed really obsessed with it. Hey, maybe sometime you and me can go try some. How about it?" Though Hinata was considering Takeo's offer, she decided to overlook the sudden killer intent. She was struggling to think of a response while she considered it. There was a part of her that was begging to say yes, but she knew it had nothing to do with attraction. She knew something was wrong, but she was also told, and this was a stronger part, that she couldn't betray Naruto by going on a date with Takeo, even if she was just doing it to gather information or to calm her suspicions. Hinata thought frantically, "AD? Date? Do you mean AD? Date? Why?" Hinata inquired, and Takeo grinned widely. Takeo said nonchalantly, "Yeah, I guess you can call it that." Hinata was unable to respond because she was still grappling with her devotion to Naruto and her desire to understand why she thought something was amiss with the ninja in front of her. Takeo interpreted her silence as her response. "Naruto trusts me to be loyal to him, and I always will be. He would know that I wouldn't love anyone else but him, Hinata said, looking up and hearing the sadness in Takeo's voice. That's okay then. With a tiny, fake smile that she hoped was sincere, Hinata said, I'd love to. Takeo's attitude brightened significantly, and he grinned from ear to ear as Nozomi's murderous intent suddenly skyrocketed, but neither seemed to mind. Excellent. I'm eager to see when that will happen, but I'm not sure. Cross happened to be nearby enough to hear Takeo yell, so he stopped walking to allow Takeo to catch up. Cross wanted to know what Takeo was talking about. What am I looking forward to? Takeo merely scowled at Cross before grinning and sticking his tongue out at him when he asked. I have a date. What the hell is so funny? Cross asked, suppressing a laugh before chuckling and then bursting out laughing. When Takeo screamed, Cross calmed down and answered. Your last statement. That gave Cross a bump on the head, and he fell back and grabbed his head. Ow, it sounded like you said you got a date. Yes, it is painful, isn't it? Perhaps you should keep your mouth shut the next time, Takeo remarked as he, Hinata, and Nozomi passed. Cross got up and trailed behind his friends, complaining as they went. When the four of them finally got outside the academy, Sasuke and Haku were waiting for Hinata, and it appeared that Sasuke was growing impatient. He was both relieved and perplexed to see Hinata and the Kumo ninjas arrive. Who are the losers here? Cross objected to Sasuke calling them losers, so he asked Hinata. Sasuke looked at Cross once before responding, we're not losers. I call them like I see them. A kunai smashed into Sasuke's face, cutting his left cheek slightly. He turned to see who had thrown it and noticed Nozomi holding out her hand. You are the only one who loses here. Nozomi retracted her hand and placed it on her hip, saying, mock me or my friends again, and next time it won't just be a scratch. Sasuke simply grunted and growled as he turned away, while Haku approached Takeo. How are you familiar with Hinata? Haku inquired. Takeo smiled, held out his hand, and said, I don't, we just met, well officially. Unaware of Nozomi's murderous intentions, Haku shook his hand and smiled back at him, saying, nice to meet you, I'm Takeo Ryusaki. My name's Haku, nice to meet you too. Maybe we can go now and take the damn test. Nozomi said impatiently, and Takeo gave her a look that said, calm down. Nozomi took note of the look, then gave her own, saying, what? With a sigh, Takeo turned to face Hinata. Hinata thought she saw a little bit of Naruto in Takeo, and when she looked at her, she felt as if a powerful genjutsu had been placed on her. Team Kumo and Kakashi approached the academy and proceeded to the designated room, saying, guess she's right, let's go. They went by a class with a genjutsu over it on the way there. Curious, Takeo watched as a genin was pushed back and landed on her back. The genin with the brown hair begged, hey come on, let us through. She wore a light red Chinese shirt, green capris, and blue ninja shoes. Her hair was styled in a bun. Everyone was being kicked out of the supposed exam room by two genin who were standing in front of it. No chance, we're just cutting down the casualties. We're actually doing you guys a favor by not letting you through. You should be thanking us actually. One of the genin replied. A black, spiky haired genin wearing a green shirt under an odd-looking protective vest was the next to attempt to pass the two genins. He was dressed in black ninja shoes and green shorts. He attempted to enter but was also knocked down. Lee! Exclaimed the brown-haired genin, worried. As he stood behind a group of genin gathered at the door, Lee said, I'm okay Tenten. When Hinata saw her cousin join his team, she became tense. Sakura came up behind Sasuke and gave him a neck hug before he could respond. Sakura exclaimed, Sasuke.kun. What a surprise. When Sakura's high-pitched yell nearly deafened Nozomi, she covered her ears. Takeo chuckled at Nozomi, while Cross merely grinned. She wasn't pleased at all with their responses. In the background, you could hear Sasuke straining to break free. What do you think is so funny? Takeo said, trying in vain to contain his laughter, and nothing. Cross simply smirked and shook his head, finding her expression amusing. When Sakura yelled, Hinata was trying not to laugh after seeing Nozomi's face. Fortunately, Nozomi was not observing her. Nothing. Well then stop laughing or I'll. Takeo attempted to call her bluff by saying, you what? I dare you to do something. Nozomi simply averted his gaze and grinned. Takeo attempted to stop her after realizing what she was doing. You know I was kidding right? You don't have to do anything. Is it the dare, is it because? I triple dog dare you not to do something. Come on I was just kid. Damn it Cross you can at least help me out, Takeo said to his companion. Cross simply gave a shoulder shrug. Do I need to remind you that she's angry at you too? You know. Takeo's right Nozomi, there's no harm done. You don't have to do anything drastic. Cross concurred. Nozomi simply grinned more and turned to leave. Nozomi, come on. Damn it, you know we're screwed, right? Replied Takeo. Cross nodded his head in the hopes that whatever she was going to do wouldn't hurt as much as it had the last time. Fascinated, Hinata observed. Takeo was hilarious, and she was surprised to find that she liked spending time with him. The thought of her crush on him came back to her, and she blushed again. She mentally kicked herself at how weak her argument sounded, saying, "It's only because he reminds you a bit of Naruto, but he isn't him." Sunshine? Takeo jolted her out of her reverie. Huh? Before rushing off with Cross to catch up with their teammate, Takeo exclaimed, "Okay, you're awake. I thought you somehow managed to sleep while standing up. Anyways, me and my team got to go, I'll see you later." Hinata was a little saddened as she watched him leave. Since Naruto, no one had been able to bring her joy. For the first time in months, she felt that way thanks to this silver-haired ninja. The speed at which she had moved on from Naruto made her despise herself. She was unable to ignore the fact that she had grown fond of Takeo and that there was nothing she could do about it. Nevertheless, she held on to her affection for the blonde-haired ninja because she still felt that something was off. After that, Hinata focused on her teammates, who were experiencing some difficulties. Sasuke was being persuaded by Haku and Sakura not to fight Lee merely to determine who was stronger. Hinata looked at her cousin, then sighed and turned her head away. She already wished the exams were over before they had even begun. She thought about Takeo and followed Sasuke and the other Leaf Genin, ignoring the other Genin who had clearly not yet seen the Genjutsu. What makes me think of him? Why doesn't he simply go? His short, silver hair. His eyes were dark blue and glistened when the sun shone on them. His smile when he looks at me. The WH. Hold on a second. With a sudden pause, Hinata returned her attention to Takeo's face. She was certain she hadn't seen it, but she wasn't sure if he had it. She might be mistaken, but she would find out the next time she saw Takeo. Team Kakashi went to the third floor after Sasuke had suffered a severe defeat to Lee, and they discovered Kakashi standing at the door. Haku asked cautiously, "Kakashi, Sensei, are you guarding the door?" Kakashi arched the one eyebrow that was visible. His team simply nodded, and he grinned. No. I'm actually here to tell you guys to be careful. Also, don't forget about teamwork." Kakashi attempted to lighten the mood by remarking, "I'm sure wherever Naruto is, he's probably eating ramen." It was more effective on some people than others. Hinata tried not to cry, but Haku and Sasuke took it easy and allowed a tiny smile to tug at their lips. She would always remember Naruto, regardless of how long he was gone. More than anything, she longed to taste his lips again, to be held close by him and never let go. Unfortunately, as long as Naruto is still wherever he is, that will never happen. At least not in her imagination. Kakashi urged, "Now go out there and take that exam." Team Kakashi nodded and exchanged glances before going into the room. They saw genin from all over the country when they walked in. They saw some from Konoha as well as Suna, Kumo, Kiri, Iwa, and Ado. The sheer number of genin taking the Chunin exams was astounding. Team Kakashi wasn't the only people scanning the room, which was unfortunate for Sasuke. Sakura and Ino both screamed, "Sasuke-kun," as they leapt Sasuke. "Ah!" was a shout that cut through the room, drawing everyone's attention and cutting off other conversations. After hearing the two banshees scream, Nozomi, who was on the left side of the room, held her ears. Nozomi shouted, "Damn it, don't you two ever shut up." Which made a lot of the other genin laugh from different locations. Takeo and Cross were by Nozomi's side, attempting to soothe the frightful when irate girl. The majority of the genin in the room laughed once more as Sakura and Ino blew raspberries and stuck their tongues out at her. Nozomi attempted to tear the two fangirls apart, but Takeo and Cross restrained her. Team Kumo approached the remaining rookie 12-1 after she had calmed down. With the exception of Nozomi, all of the girls laughed at Hinata's nickname, "Hey there's Sunshine." Naturally, Hinata blushed in response. Other than Kiba and Neji, none of the guys cared. When Neji heard Hinata's nickname, especially from a Kumo ninja, it didn't exactly look good because he didn't think much of Hinata. Takeo noticed that his facial expression perfectly captured his feelings about Hinata. Since Naruto, no one has been able to make Hinata blush, which infuriated Kiba. Kiba saw no rival for Hinata's love now that Naruto was gone. Some lowlife punk, however, had already accomplished what most haven't been able to. Kiba asked, "Who you calling Sunshine?" A tiny smirk formed on Takeo's lips as he raised an eyebrow. Takeo said, "Why Sunshine of course," as if it were the most apparent thing in the world. As Kiba's hatred for Takeo increased tenfold, His veins became visible. Cross tried to calm Kiba down by standing between them after noticing his expression and realizing that Takeo's naive smile wasn't helping. Cross didn't finish because Kiba gave him a sucker punch to the face. "Whoa there, little doggy, let's not," he said. "Who are you calling?" Nozomi delivered one of her own sucker punches to Kiba, who failed to finish this time. She was trying to control her anger, so her breathing was controlled and shallow. Kiba screamed, "What the hell was that for?" Before he could respond, a glass-clad, silver-haired Konoha genin approached them and asked, "What the hell do you think? Hey, you guys might want to keep it down." He issued a warning. Cross gave him a suspicious look because he didn't like the vibe he got from the Konoha genin. With caution, Takeo inquired, "And why is that?" "Because then everyone here will mentally put a bull's eye on you." After rising from the sucker punch he received, Nozomi, who was also dubious of the genin's motivations, asked, "What's your name?" Takeo lowered his sights and saw him holding cards, saying, "Kabuto Yakushi." Takeo inquired, "What's with the cards?" Kabuto laughed as he glanced at the cards he was holding. Nozomi and Cross became suspicious when Kabuto revealed, "These are info cards I collect. You see, this will be my 7th attempt in the Chunin exams. Though my past failures didn't go to waste as I have information on ninjas from Konoha and from other nations. What if they get into the wrong hands? They may lead to the downfall of many in this room, in and out of the Chunin exams." Nozomi responded. Cross wasn't persuaded, but Kabuto assured him, "Probably, but these cards only respond to my chakra, so it'll be okay." Takeo shouted, "Well, let's see what they can do." Kabuto pulled out his cards with a sly smile. "Well, give me any kind of description. Blonde, tall, skinny, fat, short, odd. Anything." Kabuto responded enthusiastically. Sasuke began, but someone else carried on after him, Rock Lee. Surprised by the second person he requested, Takeo said, "Gaara of the Desert and Neji Hyuga." He growled silently at his folly. Takeo thought, "I'm not supposed to let my emotions get control over me." "You know their name? That's no fun." Kabuto used some of his chakra on 3 separate cards, and everyone saw the information about the 3 ninjas mentioned above appear. As you can see, it's pretty impressive. Rock Lee and his team have finished more than 50 D rank missions, 20.2 C rank missions, and 1 B rank mission. He makes up for his deficiencies in ninjutsu and genjutsu in taijutsu, which indicates that he is an expert in hand combat and reasonably skilled with a bow staff. According to Gaara of the Desert, he has completed 8 A rank missions, 7 B rank missions, and 14 C rank missions. Additionally, it claims that he never gets hurt on his missions. That is astounding, nearly unreal. Strangely, there isn't much more information about him in this. Neji Hyuga, in the same team as Rock Lee, so you already know the number of missions. Says here that he's been trained in the art of the gentle fist. He's a branch member and is considered a prodigy in the eyes of his clan. His Kekkei Genkei is the famous Byakugan, very impressive. Seems like this year's genin are tougher than last year. Sasuke pointed to Takeo and questioned, "Wait, what about him?" "Me?" inquired Takeo. Kabuto searched his cards while glancing at him. "Strange, there doesn't seem to be a card on you. What's your name?" Kabuto inquired. Kabuto looked through his cards once more but was unable to locate Takeo Ryusaki. Kabuto glanced at Takeo and arched an eyebrow. Takeo merely grinned and asked, "Who are you? I thought your cards had information on everyone here." An Auto ninja who wasn't from them arched an eyebrow and said, "They do, even that small group from Auto." With his team charging, the leader said, "Let's show them just how small our group is." He attempted to strike Kabuto with his fist, but Kabuto blocked it. Kabuto's eyes widened and he dropped to his knees, saying, "You're going to have to do better than that." Before long, he vomited and noticed that his glasses were broken. He was unable to see what the Auto ninja had done. Humph, pathetic. The Auto ninja then spoke, and a sword was placed on his throat. He noticed Takeo holding a strange-looking sword to his right. It had no guard. It had a black grip with incomprehensible little inscriptions. With the exception of the blade, which was pure silver like Takeo's hair, everything was black. Additionally, the blade was thicker than the majority of swords the Auto.nin had previously seen. Takeo said, dangerously low, "Let's wait until we start the exams, I think that'll be in everyone's interest." He then increased the pressure on Otto's neck until some blood dripped out of it. A voice boomed out as a smoke bomb suddenly exploded in the room. Takeo and the Auto nin shook their heads, which made Ibiki Morino, the boisterous Konoha ninja, smirk. "All right, maggots, sit down in your assigned seats and shut up because I am not going to repeat myself. You, Otto and Kumo, You don't want to be disqualified before the exams start, do you? They will be taking a written exam with 10 questions, Ibiki explained. Good, now sit down and I'll explain how this is going to work. They will be removed from the exam if they are found to have cheated 5 times. Before giving them the 10th question, Ibiki gave them 45 minutes to respond to the first 9. Hinata had the good fortune or bad luck to sit directly beside Takeo. Before glancing down at his own paper, he gave her a smile. Hinata felt strange because her blush came back, but her heartbeat didn't change. But after a moment, she smiled a little to herself. He'll be the only one forever. 3 genin stood up and left the room as one Chunin yelled, "Candidate number 38, you and your teammates get up and leave. You're busted." Though she was relieved not to be called upon, Hinata panicked. She was aware that none of the answers were familiar to her when she began reading the questions. Unobtrusively, she glanced around and noticed a couple of people frantically writing down the answers. She then witnessed some of the other genin cheating by using their Kekkei Genkai or other skills. Sakura didn't have to cheat. Sasuke used his Sharingan. Shino used his bugs. Kiba used Akamaru. And even her cousin used his Byakugan. Hinata had a sudden epiphany. They wanted her to cheat. It was incredibly straightforward yet cunningly dishonest. She swiftly turned on her Kekkei Genkai and began imitating a genin who had all the answers. After finishing, she set down her pencil and bided her time until everyone had finished. She closed her eyes and lowered her head. Soon after, she dozed off, but she woke up again because her arm hurt. When she opened her eyes, Takeo was also dozing off and drooling over his test. The scene in front of Hinata made her laugh, but she couldn't help but think of Naruto during an academy test. Then she looked at Takeo's face and recalled what she wanted to learn about him. I knew it, Hinata thought, but Ibiki's shouting prevented her from thinking any further. Alright, that's it for the first 9 questions, now it's time for the 10th question. Now let me warn you no. Those that do not answer the 10th question correctly will be dropped from the program and never be allowed to take the Chunin exams ever again. This caught the attention of everyone. Many appeared ready to voice their complaints, but Ibiki was the first to do so. Before any of you start crying, you can leave now and take the test next year. So you have 2 options. 1. Leave now, fail and take the test next year, or 2. Risk your whole shinobi career on one last question. Kakashi pulled out his perverted book and remarked, It's so peaceful without the genin running around. I almost miss them. Asuma blew out the smoke from his cigarette after taking another drag. As the smoke spread throughout the room, Kurenai held her breath. Don't worry, they'll be back before you know it, Asuma replied. Why's that? Kakashi put down his book and gave Asuma a suspicious look. I heard their first examiner this year is Ibiki. Kurenai merely listened to their conversation. Great, already I don't think they'll make it. Funny how they gave them that sadist right off the bat. Kurenai said, What sadist? Asuma inhaled another puff of smoke and laughed. Kurenai glared at Asuma and said, I guess you are a new Junin, otherwise you wouldn't have to ask that. So I'm ignorant. Who is he? He's what you might call a specialist. Asuma took a while to respond, but she did so. In what? Kurenai gasped, wondering how wise it was to allow her genin to take the Chunin exams. Interrogation. Torture. Of course it's nothing physical, not like he needs to. He likes to work on the mind instead of the body, and everyone knows that he's head of the Anbu Torture and Interrogation Corps for Konoha. Kiba shouted, That's bullman, at Ibiki. Ibiki laughed uncontrollably as he said, I've seen people take these exams more than once, what's up with that? This confused a lot of the genin. As he spoke, Ibiki's tone abruptly became serious. Maybe so, but many genin looked at one another uncertainly. They didn't have me supervising the exams those years, but you have the misfortune of having me this year. So if you're not feeling confident about it, then by all means, drop out and try again next year. However, Team Kakashi didn't care. They planned to stay and answer the 10th question. Ibiki made the decision to end the exam after a few minutes of people leaving. So you're all that's left, huh? 72? That is far more than I had anticipated. It looks like this year will be interesting. Sakura chose to speak up despite everyone's shock. Those of you remaining, I'd like to say, you pass. Ibiki laughed and responded, Wait, what do you mean we pass? What happened to the 10th question? There was no 10th question, well, not technically. You see, in a way, your decision to stay and answer the 10th question was the 10th question. Wait a minute, so we wasted our time answering the other nin question. Is that what you're saying? Tamari asked. No, not really, on the contrary. They served their purpose, to test your ability to gather strategic intelligence under the most adverse circumstance. Oh well, that explains everything, Cross remarked mockingly. Then let me explain. You see, I not only had to test you individually but as a team and how well you function as a team. That's why every time you did something or failed to do something greatly affected your team. To see how you'd handle the pressure. Takeo raised his eyebrows. I thought it was something like that. Hinata laughed at Takeo's antics, and his teammates simply started to perspire. As you probably realized by now, the questions were hard, too hard for normal genin to answer or even understand. Most of you realized this and started cheating. The fact is that this test encouraged cheating, it almost demanded it. Of course, it wouldn't help if you couldn't copy off of someone with the right answers, so I had two Chunin who already knew the answer sit in with you. Takeo's sweat dropped and lowered his head. Ibiki took off his headband to reveal his head scars, saying, "It's better to not cheat than to do it badly." Everyone freaked out, but most people handled it better than others. He put his headband back on and went on talking. Depending on how well you can gather information can determine whether a mission is a success or a failure, but you got to be careful of who you get your information from. Getting it from the enemy doesn't necessarily mean it's accurate. In fact, disinformation is worse than no information. It could mean the death of a comrade or the loss of a village. That's why I forced you all to cheat to pass. Those who could not do so without getting caught were dismissed. Tamari repeated, "Okay, but I still don't get the whole 10th question." It's simple really, it was the whole point of the whole test. As I mentioned, the whole point of the test was to test your teamwork. I gave you two options, both difficult choices. You could play it safe and try again next year, though it meant that you and your teammates failed. Or you could take the risk and try to answer the 10th question even though you knew that if you got it wrong, you could fail and ever become a Chunin. A lose situation. But Chunin face this sort of situation every day. Ibiki took a moment to breathe deeply. Let me give you a hypothetical situation. Say you were given a mission where you had to retrieve a scroll from an enemy base. You have no idea how well guarded it is or how many are guarding it. Furthermore, you have reason to believe they're expecting you, so you could be walking into a trap. So do you pass the insane mission just so you and your comrades could live another day, to avoid danger? No, you will have many more missions that'll seem almost suicidal in retrospect. But that's not what you think about. You think about the success of the mission and the discipline and courage you need to complete your goal. Now that they knew they had made the right decision, the majority of genin were resolute. Ibiki gave the genin a smile before leaping back to see a tiny black ball unfold and spread out a sheet, signaling the second examiner's arrival. Listen up you punks. My name is Anko Mitarashi and I'll be babysitting all of you brats for the next part of the exam. Anko screamed. Ibiki sighed as the majority of the genin were taken aback. Ibiki said, "You're early Anko." Anko hung her head and looked around. She remarked, "You're getting soft Ibiki." Ibiki simply gave a shrug. To be honest, he didn't think so many genin would have the courage to finish the test. Anko grinned and licked her lips in an animalistic manner before saying, "Come on, let's go to the next part of the exam. It'll take place in the Forest of Death." Takeo dismissed it with a smile. Hinata didn't really care that her response wasn't as bold as Takeo's. Takeo got to his feet and extended his hand to assist Hinata in standing. As they walked out of the room, Takeo nodded his head and said, Thank you." Hinata asked Takeo a question while they were outside. Hinata inquired inquisitively, Takeo, why are you so nice to me?" Takeo struck a contemplative pose. "Because I made a promise, and I always keep my promises." Takeo replaced the subject before Hinata could ask him any more questions. One member of the group was followed by two pairs of eyes as they traveled to the Forest of Death. As Hinata blushed and giggled, Takeo casually put an arm over her and spoke to her, while the two ninjas lurked in the shadows. The shorter ninja growled, "Why should I wait for them to enter the damn forest?" The taller ninja simply grinned and let its hair fly in the air as it sensed the rise in its comrade's desire to kill. "Don't like what you're seeing?" inquired the second ninja. The shorter ninja merely gave a glare. The shorter ninja snapped, "No I don't, you know I bloody don't. This is a load of bulls," and slapped him across the back of his head. According to the taller ninja, "What did I tell you?" Observing the remainder of the genin walk to the Forest of Death, the shorter ninja complained. The taller ninja nodded and followed the genin, who were all oblivious to their pursuit. "Come on, let's get going. We don't want to lose them." As they continued to observe the interaction between the Kumo and Konoha genin, a pair of eyes flared with anger, while another pair became excited and bloodlust filled. The two ninjas who were pursuing the genin were then confronted by a ninja wearing a black cloak. The new ninja said, "I found you. Where have you been?" "I was tied up at the moment, what do you want?" The shorter figure considered, "I've come here to train you. Let's just wait until after the second part of the exams. Trust me, we'll have more time then." The shorter ninja smirked as the third ninja questioned, but why wait until then? After nodding, the third ninja vanished, saying, because a promise is a promise. This time I will get my revenge. This time it will be you who loses. Just you wait, Takeo Ryusaki. So Sunshine, you ready to take the exam? Takeo asked after receiving a heaven scroll and submitting his application. According to Anko, each team will receive one scroll, whether it be an earth or heaven scroll, and the goal is to steal the other team's scroll so they can move on to the castle in the middle of the forest in the next exam phase. They were required to sign and return a form outlining their acceptance of the possibility of death during the exam. Hinata said, why? Yeah, what scroll did you get? She let out a sigh of relief as Takeo showed her the scroll of heaven. She didn't have to oppose Takeo's team because her team also won the heaven. He nodded his head when Hinata showed him the scroll of heaven and asked, what did you get? The huge murderer's intent rose as he smiled at her and whispered something in her ear, making her flush. Hinata pondered for a moment after sensing this murderer's intent. She recognized the other one, but it was different from the two that were clearly coming from Nozomi and Kiba. She searched the area but was unable to find anyone else with dangerously high levels of killer intent. Takeo parted from Hinata and asked, what do you say? To which Hinata replied, I guess. Takeo asked for a lot of things right now, but she was unable to refuse. It was as if a genjutsu had been applied to her or something. She shook her head and observed Takeo and his teammates making their way to the designated gates. As Hinata approached her teammates, she noticed that Sasuke and Haku were observing her with interest. She arched her brow. Haku turned away when Hinata said, Anyo, why are you looking at me like that? But Sasuke continued to stare at her. No reason, though it seems that you've been hanging around that silver-haired idiot a lot, said Sasuke. Hinata took note of what he had said and what it implied. She walked past them, flushed. We should be getting to our gates by now. Sasuke was not far behind her as Haku followed her, her thoughts racing. Upon arriving at the gates, they were taken aback to discover Kushina idly leaning against the fence, seemingly anticipating a visitor. She opened one eye and closed it again as Team Kakashi materialized in front of her. Getting off the fence, Kushina remarked, well, it's about time you guys got here. She approached Hinata, took hold of her arm, and pulled her behind a tree. After a brief glance at Kushina, Sasuke leaned against the gate and said, it'll be fine. I just need to talk to Hinata for a moment. Haku let out a sigh and bided his time until Kushina and Hinata came back. Kushina said sweetly, hey Hinata, how you been? Which made Hinata nervous. If she didn't need money or a favor, which were never good things, she wouldn't get this sweet. Kushina simply grinned and began to frighten Hinata, saying, hello Kushina-san. Hinata could see that there was some sadness hidden behind her smile. What's wrong, Kushina-san? Kushina asked, her smile vanishing as a tiny tear escaped her eye. Kushina said solemnly, I still haven't found Naruto. The pain from the day Hinata learned Naruto would not be returning home was still present in her heart. At that thought, tiny tears broke free from their captivity. With a tone of disappointment, Hinata uttered, oh. Listen Hinata. I want to find Naruto just as much as you but, maybe. Kushina's words caused her great pain, which only increased until Hinata intervened. No. Kushina exclaimed as she gazed up at Hinata's trembling figure. Tears were streaming from her eyes as she looked at the ground rather than at her. Kushina raised her hand to put it on her shoulder, but Hinata took a step back. Hinata. Kushina could see the anguish and anger in Hinata's eyes as she looked up. Hinata calmed down at the end and put her hands over her heart, almost as if clutching at it, in an attempt to lessen the severe pain she was experiencing there. You can give up but I won't. I know he's out there. Somewhere, I know it. Kushina looked back at Hinata with tears in her eyes and hung her head in shame for implying that they should give up. Hinata gave Kushina a hug in return, saying, you're right, Hinata, we shouldn't give up. I'm sorry for suggesting it. The taller ninja in the distance were holding back the shorter ones from earlier. The shorter ninja bellowed, come on, this is the perfect chance. Look at them. The shorter ninja's ignorance only caused the taller ninja to sigh. No, not now besides, remember who your target is. I'm surprised you chose to follow the Hyuga girl instead of that idiot Takeo. The taller ninja replied. All the shorter ninja could do was scoff. The taller ninja smiled and arched an eyebrow, saying, shut up, I have my reasons. Besides, even though Takeo is my target, that doesn't mean I can't have more than one target, does it? In response, the shorter ninja struck him in the head. You know what I mean, anyways, I got someone watching over Takeo so I've got nothing to worry about. As they announced that the Chunin would open the gates to let the genin begin the second portion of the Chunin exams, Kushina and Team Kakashi waited. Haku and Kushina caught up, discussing her recent experiences and state of mind. Following the Chunin's signal to open the gates, Kushina unlocked the gate without actually opening it. She faced them and began to talk. Kushina then moved aside, allowing the genin in front of her to dash into the forest of death. I can tell you by experience that this won't be easy. Teamwork is the key to this exam being a success. Please heed my words and take them to heart. As she left, she muttered, "Good luck," hoping they would live and turn into Chunin. As usual, Team Kakashi ran in the forest of death, with Sasuke at the front, Hinata in the center, and Haku at her rear. They ran 5 minutes farther into the forest and came to a stop. Sasuke gave the order, "Hinata, take on last surveillance before we rest." With a sigh of relief, Hinata turned off her Byakugan after nodding and using it to check her surroundings. When Takeo returned from his surveillance, he exclaimed to his teammates, "It's clear." Nozomi untied her hair in a ponytail, relaxed, and sat down. Cross sat down too and stared. Takeo grinned and raised an eyebrow, asking, "So Takeo, what's up with you and the Hyuga girl?" He then raised an eyebrow and said, "Why do you ask? Are you jealous?" A wiggle followed. Nozomi pouted, but she blushed. Nozomi shot back, "I just want to know what options are open." Cross closed his eyes and snorted. Nozomi threw all of her anger at Cross. Cross sighed and opened an eye. "You got something to say?" he asked. Nozomi became enraged when Cross said, "You say you want to know what options are open. That is ridiculous, you are jealous. There are only 2 options, either Takeo or none at all." Kiba grinned smugly as Team Kurenai emerged before anyone could move. Takeo sarcastically said, "Oh hey, it's dog breath, what do you want?" as Cross got to his feet. Shino and Sakura stood back, obviously not wanting to get involved, while Kiba approached Takeo and puffed out his chest. Kiba growled, but Takeo smiled. "I came here to tell you something. You better back off Hinata, she's mine," Kiba said. Kiba snarled once more, but Cross shoved him away. "I'll tell you what, I will continue to see sunshine if I want to, and if I don't that will be my decision. Now how about you back off?" "What the?" Cross shouted angrily, "You and I have a score to settle, mutt. Now stand and fight me." Instead, Kiba got to his feet and grinned. Kiba turned back to Takeo, who was still grinning, and said, "Nah, you're not the one I want to fight. I'm not interested." Cross growled and hurried over to Kiba. "Well, get interested." The strange grass nin threw another kunai, which Sasuke dodged and leapt back. As promised, Haku and Hinata remained behind to watch Sasuke handle the grass nin. Sasuke was not handling the grass nin, unfortunately. The grass nin actually did the exact opposite, kicking Sasuke back and landing on his back. As he ran at the grass nin once more, Sasuke's eyes grew angry. "Very pathetic, Sasuke. If you keep going in this pace, you'll never catch up to Itachi." She was hoping for precisely that. A strange ice mirror materialized between Sasuke and the grass nin just as she was ready to reach out her neck. Then, as she hurled Senbon at the grass nin, Haku's image appeared in the mirror. They dodged the mirror after the grass nin stepped aside and threw her own kunai. Sasuke let out a furious roar. After glancing back, Haku responded, "What the hell do you think you're doing? I told you I'd handle it," and carried on with the attack. Haku dodged the grass nin's most recent kunai and said, "You are losing, and if you lose, you might die. That is not an option when it comes to this exam and to being a Konoha ninja." Sasuke snarled in rage. He felt that teamwork softened people rather than made them more effective. Relying on someone simply indicates that you are too weak to support yourself. After that, Sasuke stood up and went to battle the grass nin. Haku wasn't at fault if he got in the way. Hinata remained behind to protect their heaven scroll while she watched her 2 teammates battle. Kiba and Cross were engaged in their own battle a mile away. Cross twisted Kiba's hand and deflected a vicious blow to his head. As he backed away, Kiba yelled, but he was unable to. Kiba was thrown into the air when Cross backed his left fist and struck him in the stomach. Cross began using hand signals, taking advantage of the circumstance. Lightning style. Lightning needle jutsu. Cross pointed at Kiba as lightning struck his left hand. Kiba's body was in the path of thousands of lightning needles. Kiba waited for the pain while closing his eyes. Kiba was hit in the front by each needle. Due to the law of gravity, Kiba fell and slammed into the ground, smoldering and immobile. Cold metal touched his neck, stopping Shino's attempt to lift him. "Well, how about you show us your scroll, and depending on which one you have will depend on how long you'll live," Takeo replied with a scowl. Shino didn't show it, but it rocked him to his core. Sakura produced a scroll of heaven after he nodded his head in her direction. With a growl, Takeo put his sword back in its sheath. Takeo commanded, "Take your teammate and go." Shino approached Kiba and picked him up. Then he and Sakura vanished, leaving Team Kumo nearly alone once more. Elemental Style. Baneway Molten Whirlpool Jutsu. The Kumo group was attacked by a vortex, whirlpool of water and fire, which forced them to disperse and reassemble. Unfortunately, Takeo was forced to fly farther into the forest by the afterblast of the attack. A powerful genjutsu was applied over his team, knocking them out just as they were ready to follow him. They were pulled to the side of a tree by a cloaked figure that materialized in the clearing. The figure grinned and glanced in Takeo's direction. A second figure with a similar looking cloak leapt into the same clearing and gazed at the shorter figure, saying, "Payback is sweet." With a shake of its head, the shorter figure explained, "Looks like you mastered that jutsu." "No, I still have a little trouble controlling it. I meant to hit Takeo but he moved at the last second. Luckily, it still was enough to hurt him. If my guess is correct, he should be unconscious right now." Fire Style. Fireball Jutsu. Sasuke spit out a massive fireball and roared. It made its way to the grass nin, who called forth a massive serpent. As the snake was swallowed by the fireball, the grass nin leapt off it and forced it back to reality. Haku hurled an ice senbon as he swiftly emerged behind the grass nin. The grass nin's face was scratched, causing her to cause her skin to peel. At that moment, the grass nin vanished from view. "Look what you did, that's not good." Sasuke, Hinata, and Haku searched everywhere for the unusual grass nin. Behind Haku, Hinata noticed a chakra signature with her Byakugan. Hinata warned, "Haku, behind you," but it was too late. Haku was rendered unconscious when the grass nin, which had transformed from the tree branch she was standing on, sliced her behind the head. Sasuke launched a volley of shuriken at the grass nin before they could take any further action. They just missed Haku, and she leapt back to sea. Hinata yelled, "Sasuke, watch out for Haku," but Sasuke simply sneered and carried on fighting the grass nin. With the grass nin's back to a tree, Sasuke pulled out shurikens and hurled them at him. She was about to make fun of the shuriken for missing the grass nin when she saw him come back and use wire to bind her to the tree. After Sasuke persisted in his assault, she fought against the wire but was forced to stop. Fire Style. Dragon Flame Jutsu. Suddenly, a massive fire spread quickly across the wires and towards the grass nin. The grass nin barely had time to scream before she was consumed by the fire. Panting, Sasuke knelt down. He was going to pick up Haku with a smug grin on his face when a grass nin's head rushed at Sasuke and a neck stretched out. When the grass nin bit Sasuke's neck, he was unable to move out of the way because he was too exhausted. In agony, Sasuke clutched his neck and collapsed. Hinata and Sasuke watched as more of her face peeled off as the grass nin pulled back her neck. Her eye resembled that of a snake, and beneath her skin was another skin as pale as snow. Hinata cried out in rage, "W! What did you do to Sasuke?" The grass nin simply gave a manly laugh. When the grass nin threw her earth scroll, it fell at Hinata's feet. "Just something to remember me by. Sasuke will soon seek me out, just to obtain my power, but I can't have you three not continue the exams, so as my parting gift," she said. The grass nin disappeared and was never seen again. "You can have my scroll. It has no use for me. I'll see you around." Sasuke. After picking up Haku, Hinata grabbed the earth scroll and hurried to Sasuke. Meanwhile, Sasuke was on the ground, gripping his neck and moaning in agony. Sasuke didn't respond to the question, "Sasuke, are you okay?" because he was too preoccupied with moaning about the excruciating pain in his neck. 10 feet from Hinata, Takeo suddenly smashed into a branch after emerging from the sky. With a gasp, Hinata went to check on him. She discovered him unconscious when she arrived. With a sigh, she considered how she could support Takeo and her team. Takeo and her teammates were sleeping inside the tree, and Hinata was sitting in front of it. Before nightfall, she managed to set up traps. She was sleeping at the moment and was doing well until she began to feel drowsy. She heard someone approaching the tree where her team was sleeping, so she briefly closed her eyes before opening them again. Pulling out a kunai, she stood up. When she looked around, she saw nothing and no one. She returned to the tree and waited for Takeo or her teammates to awaken. She had previously observed that although his right leg was burned by fire, his clothing appeared to be damp. In fact, the right side of his body was wet and burned almost entirely. Hinata whispered, "What happened to you?" From outside the tree, someone said, "I think I can answer that." Once more assuming her defensive stance, Hinata cautiously left the tree. While she was outside, she noticed a clocked figure standing idly, his clock swaying with the wind. Unwilling to take a chance, Hinata asked, "Who are you?" With a laugh, the enigmatic individual approached Hinata. Hinata cautioned, "Don't get any closer and show yourself." As the figure approached Hinata, its chuckle turned into laughter. Her hand began to shake, so she tightened her grip and sprinted in the direction of the enigmatic individual. Hinata stopped in her tracks when the man took off his hood to reveal his true identity. With his blonde hair hanging loosely in the air, the enigmatic individual's eye grinned. Standing in front of Hinata, Naruto remarked, "Hey Hinata. Long time no see." As her first and only love stood before her, Hinata simply stared with wide eyes. He was standing casually in front of her as if nothing had happened, despite everything she had experienced over the course of 6.5 months. She pushed him back out of sheer rage, shocking him in the process. "Long time no see? Is that all you have to say, Naruto-kun? After 6 months of not seeing each other, that's the best you can come up with? I have waited for you to come back and every day I grew more and more disappointed when I didn't see you, and then you come here and tell me, 'Long time no see,' do you even care about me?" Hinata began to cry. Naruto grinned sadly as he took off his mask. Before Hinata could reply, Naruto leaned down and gave her a gentle peck on the lips. "You're right, I should say something else but I can't take those words back. And yes, I care for you deeply, I told you before I love you and I always will." When Hinata felt Naruto's lips lightly brush against hers, her eyes widened. It was as wonderful and warm as the first time she had experienced the warmth of his kisses. She tried to suppress her rage at the blonde ninja as she felt it wane, but she only realized that Naruto had experienced the same suffering when she felt his tears on her cheek. As she sobbed joyfully into the kiss, she closed her eyes and put her arms around his neck. He then put his arms around Hinata's waist, drawing her closer to his body. Naruto quickly wiped the tears from his eyes and cradled Hinata's neck as they parted to breathe. "Please don't leave me, not again," Hinata begged as his lips touched her throat. She loved every second of it, even though it gave her little chills. Naruto raised his head and gazed into her eyes so intently that she began to flush. Then Naruto gave her another kiss while grinning broadly. "I won't leave you again, Hinata. I finally have you again and I won't give you up without a fight. Like you told me, when people are in love, the time they spend together is like heaven and the times apart is like hell. I've spent the last 6.5 months living in hell without my beautiful angel there to lead me to heaven. I wish I could be in the exams with you but I can't. It'll confuse everyone and complicate everything. I'll be watching over you, Hinata. A promise is a promise after all. One last thing." This time, Naruto gave Hinata a kiss that was more passionate and loving than the last. After picking her up, he entered the hollow tree. Still kissing Hinata, he took off his cloak and laid her down. Hinata allowed her head to rest on his cloak after he placed it beneath it. She arched her neck to give Naruto more access, and he began kissing it. She was grinning slightly because she had never been happier. Naruto paused and gave Hinata a serious look while looking her in the eye. Before Hinata went to sleep, he cautioned, "Be careful of Takeo, I know you've felt it, he's not who you think he is." A second Naruto was waiting for Yame to return at Ichiraku's during this entire time. He found it strange that despite being a clone, he was still hungry. So he placed an order for ramen and began to eat. Before Yame returned, that one ramen quickly grew to 2, then 5, and finally 10. Ayame handed Naruto roughly 5 pictures and said, "Hey Naruto, here's the pictures you wanted." Naruto grinned as he perused them. "Alright, Hinata. Haim is going to love these." When Hinata woke up and saw Takeo, her eyes fluttered. When Takeo noticed that she was awake, he grinned and moved on from her. With the sun rising and Takeo still severely hurt, Hinata sat up straight and asked, "Hey there sunshine, how'd you sleep?" Then she recalled Takeo's words from the previous evening. Was it a dream? Didn't Naruto-kun actually come here? Hinata pondered gloomily. She felt something soft beneath her head as she lay back down. When she picked it up, she realized it was Naruto's cloak. She grinned broadly and embraced the cloak as if it were her life, a single tear of joy seeping into the black fabric. Takeo merely observed, perplexed. Takeo inquired, "That yours, sunshine?" Hinata grinned as she glanced at him. "Yes, it is." Hinata replayed the entire evening in her head, including their breathtaking kiss and her irate shove. She had such a bright smile that even a blind person would have to cover his eyes to avoid the glare. Takeo didn't know what made the cloak so unique, but he was simply perplexed. When Hinata and Takeo heard the sounds of a trap being set off in the morning, they turned to see the lone auto team standing idly in the clearing. The auto team leader asked, "Well, what do we have here?" Hinata was sneered at by the team's female member. The girl remarked, "She looks weak, not worth my time." The mummy, like leader, responded with a laugh. A mirror made of ice appeared in front of the leader, and Haku's image appeared, throwing her senbon at them. "Yes, she does, doesn't she? Kin, you handle the girl while I go after the Uchiha. Zaku, you take care of the silver-haired brat." Haku's senbon was rendered useless when Zaku stepped in front of everyone and wind began to flow from his hands. When Zaku saw Haku's response, he grinned arrogantly. Then Zaku broke Haku's mirror by releasing more pressurized air. "It's useless to use your kunai or shuriken. I have tubes in my arms that when I apply my chakra to it, it releases pressurized air and sends it out of my arms. Watch," he said. Haku collapsed and gasped. Haku stood and said, "I guess I still haven't recovered enough chakra." She disappeared, then resurfaced in front of Zaku, snatching both of his hands in one hand. He grinned. Haku also grinned and made one-handed hand signals, asking, "Now what?" "Secret jutsu. 1,000 needles of death," she exclaimed, leaping back before Zaku was hit by the 1,000 ice needles. Hinata was avoiding the kin's senbon in another part of the clearing. Hinata saw that each had a bell at the end and a string attached. After that, things became unclear, and she was surrounded by several relatives. Hinata closed her eyes and shook her head, but she was beginning to sway and felt a little lightheaded. Hinata landed on the ground after being kicked hard in the stomach, coughing and spitting some blood as she stood. She pulled out 2 kunai and hurled one at each kin. Hinata was unable to identify the true one as the kins leapt back. Then she recalled the bells, which were most likely the cause of her vertigo. She noticed the senbon with the bells when she turned around. After putting an explosive tag on her final kunai, Hinata threw it at the bells. Without delay, they demolished the bells and restored Hinata's stability. She ducked under a punch aimed at her head and searched for kin. She used her Byakugan and leapt back after a leg sweep. The mummy called him Dosu, and Takeo punched him, but Dosu's left arm stopped him. Takeo felt something solid when he struck and realized it was a sound gauntlet. Leaping back, he awaited Dosu's next move. Takeo felt sick to his stomach and his vision became blurry, but Dosu just grinned. Dropping to his knees, he clutched his ears. He screamed in agony, and blood began to flow. With one eye closed, he glanced up and saw that Dosu appeared to be speaking, but he was not hearing anything. He rose slowly and gestured with his hands. Then he extended his left hand and pointed it at Dosu. Elemental style. Bain-wa. Takeo collapsed to his knees once more, feeling dizzy and with pain throughout his right side from yesterday's ambush. Dosu approached Takeo, who was still not listening, and said, "Damn you, Naruto." He was aware that he was in serious trouble. A victory in his condition would require a miracle. He collapsed to the ground, face down, his agony beginning to overtake him. The last thing he saw before he passed out was Dosu backing away and someone jumping between them. He didn't die because Zaku was able to surround himself with pressurized air at the last second, but he wasn't spared any harm. At the moment, Haku was struggling to catch her breath and was panting. She found it challenging to use chakra to turn the air's condensation into ice needles. Fortunately, the morning dew was present to facilitate her journey. She now had a problem. Zaku was still in good enough condition to finish the fight, while she was nearly out of chakra. Cross, fortunately for her, leapt out of nowhere and struck Zaku in the face. Zaku began to make some hand signals as he flew back. With the words, "Fire style, Misty Flames Dance Jutsu," Cross spit out a liquid mist that covered Zaku. He began to expel the majority of the liquid from his body as soon as he stood up, leaving only his arms damp. Cross came up behind him and sent a tiny spark to his arms before he could blow it off, igniting the liquid and causing Zaku's arms to catch fire. Zaku saved his arms by acting swiftly and extinguishing the fire. He could still use them despite the severe burns and injuries. Then a shadowy presence became apparent to him. The majority of Kin's, the Auto Nin, chakra points were blocked by Hinata, and Kin was finished. Hinata blocked the chakra points on her legs as well, despite her best efforts to stand. Hinata quickly struck her in the back of the head and knocked her unconscious to ensure she wouldn't cause any trouble. Hinata turned to face Nozomi, who was preparing a jutsu, and Takeo, who was unconscious on the floor. When she was done, Hinata watched as lightning struck and Nozomi held out her hand. Lightning style. Shattering thunder. Dosu was hit, but he vanished and was replaced by a log instead. He rushed from his hiding place and gave her a back punch. Dosu felt a sudden evil presence behind him just as he was about to launch another attack. He turned to see Sasuke standing outside, surrounded by a purple aura. As he regrouped with Dosu, Zaku smiled and stepped away from Cross. Zaku held his hands and released the pressurized air, saying, "That's who Orochimaru. Sama wants us to kill, humph, doesn't seem like he's worth Orochimaru's time." Zaku wait. But it was too late. Sasuke and everything else in its path were destroyed when the air was released. The air encircled the area and kicked up dust. There was no sign of Sasuke when it cleared. Zaku scoffed and grinned haughtily. That was sad. Zaku turned to face Sasuke and asked, "What did you say?" However, before he could turn around completely, Sasuke gave him a backhand, sending him flying. Zaku straightened up and turned to Sasuke. Sasuke put his hand to his mouth and began to make hand gestures. Fire style. Phoenix Flower Jutsu. Zaku was hit by 3 tiny fires. Once more, Zaku exhaled and extinguished the fires, but shuriken were concealed within. As the shurikens dug into Zaku's flesh, his eyes grew wide with agony. Zaku dropped to his knees as Sasuke grabbed his hands from behind and planted his left foot on his back faster than anyone could follow. Zaku screamed in excruciating pain as Sasuke began yanking his arms out of their sockets. "So, you must be proud of these 2 arms, huh?" There was an piercing scream of pain and a loud popping sound that reverberated throughout the forest. With his arms broken and hunched back, Zaku collapsed unconscious at his side. Sasuke approached Dosu and remarked, "You're the only one left standing." Sasuke exclaimed, "I hope you put up a better fight," before charging ahead, only to be stopped by a clothesline in motion. After a hard fall, Sasuke leapt back and collected himself. He sneered when he saw who had stopped him. Sasuke questioned the man in front of him, who had a hooded cloak covering his face. "Who the hell are you?" Only the lower portion of the enigmatic person's face was visible, and even then, it was hidden by the mask it was wearing. The individual simply grinned and vanished. Sasuke leapt to the left, thinking the enigmatic individual would approach and strike him from behind, but instead, the axe kick came from the air. Sasuke's head struck the ground as it connected, knocking him out once more. Dosu gasped as the enigmatic individual turned to face him. Since Orochimaru, Dosu has not experienced this level of chakra. Although it wasn't as much, he couldn't handle it at all. Dosu placed the earth scroll on the ground and said, "We can't defeat you at a time like this. Let us go and we'll leave you the earth scroll." He searched for indications of approval from the enigmatic individual. He continued when he did nothing. Dosu gathered his unconscious team and prepared to depart, but Hinata's question stopped him. "Let me warn you now though, if we meet again during the Chunin exams, we'll neither hide nor run. We will win and gain Orochimaru's approval." Dosu glanced in her direction before turning around and asking, "Who's Orochimaru and what does he want with Sasuke?" "Answer her," roared the enigmatic figure. Dosu halted and faced Hinata. Dosu then leapt out of the clearing and disappeared from view, saying, "I don't know. We were just ordered to search and kill Sasuke." The not.so. Mysterious stranger caught Hinata as she relaxed and fell back. Hinata didn't want to come across as overly pampered, but she didn't mind it at all. "I'm fine, Naruto-kun. You don't need to hold me." Under his mask, she caught Naruto grinning. Hinata pulled down his mask, kissed him again, blushed, and giggled, "I know." The tall ninja, Naruto's comrade, was writing something in a pad in the shadows during their brief makeout session. As she assured him she was fine, Hinata was fortunate that Sasuke was unconscious, Nozomi was checking on Takeo, and Cross was checking on Haku. They were all too preoccupied to notice what Naruto and Hinata were doing. Naruto gave Hinata another hug as they parted ways, then grabbed the earth scroll and threw it to her. Hinata caught it, and when she looked up again, Naruto was gone. She was a little disappointed, but that didn't depress her because she now knew that he was safe, alive, and in Konoha, and more importantly, that neither her nor he had lost their love for one another. If anything, it had only grown stronger. She approached Sasuke and checked on him. For her, the fact that he was breathing was sufficient. It was only halfway through a difficult week for her. She had roughly 3 days left before she and her group needed to reach the tower in the middle of the forest. She wished she was at home with Naruto, or at least taking a long, hot shower. She dragged Sasuke over to the others after noticing Takeo beginning to regain consciousness, hoping the Kumo ninjas would assist them for a while. At least until Sasuke woke up. Naruto and the other 2 cloaked ninjas met up in the trees. While the other ninja remained passive, the taller, larger one grinned. The larger ninja congratulated Naruto, but Naruto just grinned. "Good job, Naruto. It seems you have a deep relationship with the Hyuga, but why didn't you take out Takeo now? Then you wouldn't have anything to worry about later." The other ninja replied. Naruto simply gave a shrug. The other 2 ninjas listened intently as Naruto continued, saying, "I'm sure I can take out Takeo now, but then again he's not fit to fight." Where's the fun in that? Besides. The larger ninja grinned and gave him a back pat, while the other nodded. When I fight him, I don't want him to complain that it wasn't fair. Even though he is similar to me, he's nothing like me and I'll prove it. So Itachi. Sensei, Arrow. Senin. How about we get out of here and start my training? I have a feeling I'm going to need it. When a blade struck Naruto, he leapt back. Naruto rushed at the battle toad and leapt over him to give him a kick to the back of the head as he raised his weapon once more. The battle toad landed hard and went back to the world from which he had been called. Naturally, Naruto leapt to his feet and saw a tongue attempt to seize him. The toad retracted back to its mouth, and Naruto landed on its tongue. The battle toad was upside down when Naruto suddenly leapt to his feet and kicked it on its head. It vanished, and Naruto emerged from his battle with Jiraiya's battle toads triumphant. That Jiraiya hadn't left to carry out what he refers to as his research astounded Naruto. It was essentially in the course of his research that he met him. Naruto sighed, shocked by everything that had happened to him over the past 6 months. He noticed a bird flying by in the sunlight as he looked up. There were no clouds to obstruct the sun's ability to penetrate the earth. Even though Naruto couldn't enjoy it, it was a pleasant day at the moment. He was preoccupied with thoughts of Hinata and the loneliness he had experienced over the past 6 months. He felt Jiraiya running up to him with a huge amount of chakra in his palm, so he flipped back a couple of times before he could finish remembering. He was astounded by what he saw when he looked. In his palm, he saw a spiraling orb made of chakra that was still structurally sound but rotating at a crazy rate. When Naruto saw how much damage the spiraling orb causes when it hits something, he was astounded. When Jiraiya completed his attack, the spiral left a sizable crater. Naruto exclaimed, "Whoa, what was that?" With astonishment. Jiraiya simply grinned while he picked himself up. Then he leapt from the crater and ascended to his feet. That brat is the #1 jutsu of the 4th Hokage. He made it in 3 years and taught it to me. I guess I could teach it to you. Naruto exclaimed, "Really, that would be great," with excitement. Naruto's hopes were dashed when he said, "Though, I don't know if I have the inspiration to teach right now." He genuinely detested him when he became that way and understood what he meant. Naturally, Jiraiya had to raise his eyebrows to let him know that what he wished wasn't true was in fact the case. Jiraiya nodded his head enthusiastically, and Naruto sighed. "All right, but only if you swear that you'll teach me that move." Following a series of hand signals, Naruto concluded with the modified ram sign, saying, "You're getting too dependent of this jutsu, you know." Sexy jutsu. Naruto disappeared in a cloud of smoke, to be replaced by a blonde, nude girl with some parts covered in smoke that, for some reason, remained in place. The girl's voice was seductive as she said, "Please, Master Jiraiya. Please teach me that move. I would be eternally grateful." Naruto was fighting the urge to vomit on the inside. He finds it hard to believe he came up with this move. To be honest, he persuaded Jiraiya to train him not long after they first met. For Naruto, it was a two-edged sword that got him into a lot of trouble with women and girls and worked against older or perverted men. It goes without saying that he avoided using it around women, and Nozomi made sure he understood this. He would only use this when he was in a tight spot or when Jiraiya was being uncooperative. A little blood trickled from Jiraiya's nose as he said, "All right, of course." After the blonde girl sighed and left, Naruto appeared in her place, wearing a serious expression. After his perverted smile vanished, Jiraiya pouted briefly before settling into a serious demeanor. "Okay, now before I teach you this move, we got to head into town to grab some stuff. Since we're still in the Forest of Death that's pretty far from town, and since you want to watch your girlfriend fight in the preliminary rounds that's about to start, you go there while I get the equipment," Jiraiya stated to Naruto. Naruto was both thrilled and disappointed. His disappointment vanished when he heard Hinata heading to the preliminary training. He truly wanted to learn that jutsu. After nodding, he was going to make his way to the tower in the middle of the forest when he suddenly realized something. "If I find out that you were in the hot springs doing your research, I hunt you down with Akio, and you know how she feels about perverts," warned Naruto. Jiraiya stiffened and gave a sheepish laugh. Then Jiraiya departed in a whirl of leaves, saying, "Have fun, kid." With a sigh, Naruto made his way to the tower. He decided to get Jiraiya back later because he knew that she would spy on the women in the springs. Naruto approached the tower and exclaimed, "After I see Hinata, I'm fight and kick ass." Datbeo. A shower of kunai nearly hit him, but he stopped quickly and leapt back. When a kunai flew past him, Naruto caught it and threw it back toward the spot where he initially saw it approaching. He cursed when he heard the sound of a clone spreading. With his kunai in hand, Naruto screamed, "Come on out, I know you're there, Teme." He had been missing his swords a lot. and this was the ideal opportunity to retrieve them. He was surrounded by the rustling sounds of leaves. Given how crafty his opponent could be, Naruto prepared for anything. Uncertain of its precise location, he heard a malevolent laugh reverberate throughout the forest. As he emerged with roughly 20 more shadow clones, each brandishing 2 swords, Takeo remarked, "Very well, Naruto." The alleged leader displayed both swords in each hand, touching them occasionally and scraping the blade. As he saw this, Naruto snarled and wanted to attack, but he knew it would be foolish because of his year of training with Amir. Naruto said in a low, menacing voice, "TCH. What is it you want now, Takeo? I'm not after your life at the moment, so you should be enjoying the time you have left in this world." Takeo remained smirking while observing Naruto maintain his position. "I know. I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to make sure you don't enter the tower. You see, I know you're going to hide in the shadows as you watch Sunshine fight." As his patience waned and his aggression and murderous intent increased, Naruto screamed, "Don't call her that. Don't give her nicknames like you're in love with her or something. You are not me, you're not even human." Slowly, Takeo said, "True, I'm not human, but," Takeo said lustfully, "who said I wasn't in love with her?" Naruto's teeth and fist were clenched. "She is a very sexy girl, very ripe. I love them that way. When she first saw me, she forgot all about you. She didn't even know you were still alive, and I think she didn't care. She just had eyes for me, and that's how it's going to stay. You two might have developed feelings for each other in the beginning, but she'll start a new life, a new family with me. I promised you that I will win her over, whether you're there to stop me or not," Takeo said as his clones prepared to wield their sword. Naruto was standing there at that precise moment because he knew what Takeo was doing and had done it before. However, Naruto was not going to be duped. He spoke up to Takeo with a sardonic smile. Naruto pointed to Takeo and his clones and held out his fist, saying, "You Teme, I know what you're trying to do and it's not going to work. I know how you think, how much of Teme you could be. I'll warn you now." Takeo's eyes widened and he leapt out of the way as Naruto declared, "I'm not here to play. Elemental style. Baneway Molten Whirlpool Jutsu." The flying whirlpool of fire and water destroyed the rest of his clones. Unfortunately, Takeo's left leg was struck by Naruto, who managed to change the attack at the last second. He fell to the ground, supporting his leg. He eventually got used to the pain, but when he looked up, Naruto was staring down at him as if he were about to pass judgment. As Naruto performed a series of hand signals and paused on the tiger sign, he said to the final Takeo, "Tell the real Takeo that I can't wait to do this to the real him." Fire style. Fireball Jutsu. Naruto took a deep breath and released a fireball, which cremated the final clone and caused it to disperse and abandon him. Naruto collapsed, gasping for air. He doubted that he could manage any more clones. A few minutes later, Naruto got up and made his way to the tower. He hoped he wouldn't miss Hinata's fight because of the brief detour. His spirits lifted at the mere thought of Hinata, and he resumed his running. Naruto told himself, "Just wait for me, Hinata, Haim." As the Hokage concluded his lecture on the significance of this exam, Shikamaru waited idly. All he really wanted to do was go to a roof and observe the clouds. They caused him less trouble than his life did now. His teammates caught his unenthusiastic glance to his left. While Ino was absorbed in his thoughts, Shoji was munching on chips that he had obtained from an unknown source. He would have to speculate that she was still mentally reliving the entire Gaara killing incident. Shikamaru was aware that it wasn't the most attractive thing to see. He was obviously affected by the kill, but he set it aside as problematic and gave it some thought later. However, Ino was unable to accomplish that. She most likely only witnessed the blood and guts of those nins flying everywhere. When Shikamaru recalled what Gaara said to his siblings when they questioned him about why he killed them, he shuddered. "They looked at me the wrong way." A sickly-looking Chunin was standing in front of the surviving genin, instructing him on how the test would proceed, when Shikamaru looked up front. He asked if anyone wanted to quit now after outlining the rules, and Kabuto raised his hands before walking away. It was fortunate for Kabuto to advance to this round, and Shikamaru was tempted to follow suit, but he didn't want Ino to start causing him problems. They were all quite fortunate, he thought. Every Konoha genin who ventured into the forest of death either survived or was standing here. The genin from Sound, Kumo, and Suna were also present. Although they all appeared that way, one of the Kumo genin appeared to have had better days. However, the red-haired genin appeared to have just left a spa. His clothing was undamaged, and he had no scratches. In fact, his entire team appeared to have avoided any altercations during the test. Shikamaru would have continued to consider this, but Ino cut him off. Passively, she said, "Come on Shikamaru, we need to go to the stands." Shikamaru followed his team to the stands, raising an eyebrow. Normally unruly, Ino would have screamed at him, but now she was being submissive. He didn't know that Ino, not the one who was bothering him anyhow. Leaning on the rails, he remarked, "What a drag." He wondered when the fighting would begin so that the exams could be finished sooner. He watched idly as the board scrolled through random names. When it eventually stopped, the first ninjas to engage in combat were Uchiha Sasuke vs Yoroi Akato. Sasuke ignored the slight ache in his neck as he strolled casually down to the arena. He had previously stopped Kakashi and warned him that he would personally end the match and deal with him if he used the power of the curse mark. He wondered how powerful he could become with that power, but Sasuke had laughed at him and told him he didn't need anyone's power. With a sigh, Kakashi prayed he hadn't used the curse mark. Yoroi landed on his side of the arena after jumping over the rail. He stood passively on the other side, grinning at Sasuke, while Sasuke sneered at Kabuto. He said haughtily, "Whatever, let's get this over with. The exam's ill." Looking proctor, Hayate Gecko, glanced at both fighters to check on their readiness. The proctor said languidly, "Well, if you're ready, let the match begin." As Sasuke assumed his stance, Yoroi began to call forth chakra and remarked, "Oh, I'm ready." Both of them made the decision to begin with some target practice. Sasuke responded with 3 kunai after Yoroi threw 3 shuriken. Sasuke fell as Yoroi ducked, sensing the curse mark coming on. Suppressing the pain, he saw Yoroi vanish. When Yoroi punched the ground, he looked up and moved just in time. Sasuke used his 4th kunai to stop himself after rolling. He brought Yoroi down by hitting him behind the knees with timing and momentum. Sasuke grabbed his arm as he was descending and placed him in an arm bar. Yoroi's arm began to glow with chakra as Sasuke grinned triumphantly. Sasuke felt his strength suddenly leave him as he was seized by his shirt. Though he wasn't finished, he let go of Yoroi. With his chakra still glowing in his hand, Yoroi got to his feet and grasped his neck. Sasuke's vision was becoming blurry and he was beginning to feel faint. He closed his left eye and his arms dropped limp to his sides. Disguised as Team Otto's Chunin instructor, Orochimaru observed and pondered how the Uchiha survivor would escape that situation. As Sasuke's arm continued to twitch, he thought, "Don't waste time, Uchiha." He kicked Yoroi back with what little strength he could muster, allowing him to recover. Yoroi hurried to his feet and refilled his hand. He tried to grab Sasuke as he ran at him once more. Yoroi hardly touched Sasuke as he continued to dodge, but it was enough to knock him to his knees and cause him to roll away before he could be apprehended. Yoroi sneered, "What's wrong, Uchiha? Tired already?" Black marks that looked like fire began to appear on the left side of Sasuke's face, and he growled. Sasuke stopped it right away. He didn't require assistance. In the hopes that he would use the power, Orochimaru scowled. Impatient, Yoroi charged at Sasuke, reminding him of his brief altercation with Lee. He kicked Yoroi in the chin, sending him flying through the air, and ducked beneath the thrust. With his middle and index fingers on Yoroi's back, Sasuke disappeared and then reappeared behind Yoroi. Sasuke spun him to his left and attempted to kick him in the ribs, but Yoroi blocked it. "I got to say, I didn't necessarily make this move, but from here on out, it's all original." He was about to make fun of him when Sasuke rolled beneath him and gave him a critical blow to the chin. Sasuke slammed his fist into Yoroi's stomach before turning around once more as they both started to fall to the ground. Sasuke gave Yoroi a final axe kick to the stomach, causing the concrete beneath them to crack before either hit the floor. Sasuke finished his attack and declared, "Lion's Barrage," to end the battle. Yoroi was still unconscious when Sasuke stumbled to his feet. Lee clenched his teeth after his eyes widened. He shouted, "Hey, get your own damn move." Tenten tried to calm him down. 2 of Sasuke's biggest fangirls cheered loudly when the Hayate declared, "The winner of this match, Sasuke Uchiha." Kakashi put his hand on Sasuke's shoulder and poofed beside him. Following a brief conversation, Sasuke and Kakashi both vanished in a puff of smoke. Making sure no one was looking, a cloaked boy crept into the arena and made his way up the stairs to the stands. He smiled as he walked in just as Sasuke was landing the kick. The boy ascended the stairs and approached Takeo, saying, "That's Sasuke, always trying to one-up everyone." Takeo moved to stand beside Hinata after spotting her. Hinata forced a bright smile onto her face as she glanced at him. Takeo said, "Hey." While waiting for the medics to remove Yoroi from the arena, Hinata waved. Takeo waited as well, but then he saw a tiny murderer's intent. He noticed a boy with red hair approaching him from his left. Like Cross, he wore a midnight blue cloak. He approached and went past him. leaning against the rail just a few centimeters away from Hinata and nodding his head to Haku, completely perplexing her. The red-haired boy caught Hinata's attention as well, but she ignored him. Hinata heard the enigmatic boy say, "Hello there, hon." Hinata blushed and questioned why he had called her that, while Takeo and Kiba, who had no business listening but did so anyway, became enraged. The sight of his unfathomably blue eyes made her understand why. She blushed more and laughed joyfully. She returned the greeting, saying, "YH. Hello there, kind stranger." The enigmatic boy grinned and closed his eyes. "You're a very beautiful girl. You wouldn't by any chance have a boyfriend, would you?" The young man replied. Knowing what he was doing, Hinata's laughter increased. The boy grinned and rubbed the back of his head as Takeo and Kiba's rage continued to rise. "Actually, I do. He's a very special boy, one that has my whole heart." The enigmatic redhead gave Takeo a silent glare and remarked, "He's a lucky dog to have a devoted girlfriend like you. I'd be careful if I were him, or someone just might try to take you away from him." After catching it, Hinata gave the boy a gentle arm slap. Don't worry about me, I'm a strong-willed girl and besides," she said, placing her right hand over the redhead's left hand on the rail. Takeo arched an eyebrow at this exchange between the two and questioned whether they had previously met. "No one can compare to my Naruto-kun." Kiba was furious, but Shino restrained him. The names of the next fighters were decided before anyone could do anything to stop the redhead. Nara Shikamaru vs Kinsuchi, while Kin, like Yoroi, leapt over the rail. Shikamaru walked languidly to the arena below. Hayate had let them get started when Shikamaru eventually descended. Leaping back, Kin extracted some senbon. Shikamaru was suspicious of the auto nin and arched an eyebrow. Shikamaru avoids them and hits the wall behind him after she threes her senbon. Behind him, he heard a faint jingle, but he ignored it. As he waited for Kin to continue her attack, he saw more Kins and noticed that everything was becoming hazy. Kin smirked and folded her arms across her chest, asking, What? Shikamaru grunted as he attempted to reorient himself, saying, "I guess you see it now, you see about 5 of me. That means that my trick worked. Men are such idiots." Looking back at the senbon, he noticed tiny bells and a barely perceptible wire that was connected to it to activate the bells, completing her genjutsu move. He made a hand gesture while grinning. Her body tensed as she said, "Justice aren't going to help you if you don't know who to aim to." Her right arm refused to budge when she attempted to move it. Even after trying her left leg, it remained immobile. She saw Shikamaru smirk as she looked up, her eyes wide. He made Kin mimic his steps as he walked back, saying, "Shadow Possession Jutsu success." About 4 feet before the wall behind him, he came to a stop. As Kin pulled out some senbon, he reached into his pouch with his right hand and pulled out a couple of shuriken. What are you doing? You throw yours, I throw mine, and then you'll dodge, and so will I. All you'll be doing is wasting our weapons. Shikamaru's response was a smirk. Shikamaru then threw his shurikens, forcing Kin to throw hers as well. You say that? Shikamaru missed the senbon by bending back. Kin grinned and followed suit. As she slammed her head against the wall behind her, he concluded, "But I beg to differ." When Shikamaru let go of his jutsu, she collapsed to the ground, unconscious. He said, "Troublesome woman." Hayate declared, "The winner of this match, Shikamaru Nara." Ino was taken aback by his victory. She was aware of his intelligence, of course, but she didn't believe he would put in the effort to win. Choji congratulated Shikamaru on his victory as he cheerfully munched his chips. Watching the slothful ninja make his way to his place in the stands made Tamari smile. She thought he was an intriguing ninja and hoped to face him in the championship match. vs Zaku Abumi Shino Aburame with his arms still hurt from his fight with Sasuke. Zaku walked down to the arena as Shino walked passively. They initiated the fight when they both fell. With his left hand free of the cloth that covered both of his arms, Zaku gestured toward Shino with an open palm. He said arrogantly, "I bet I can still beat you even if my right arm isn't in great shape. I'll only give you one warning. Give up now or suffer a humiliating defeat." Shino issued a warning. Zaku laughed at his caution and let go of the air pressure in his arm. Shino stepped aside and pursued Zaku with his bugs. Zaku blew some of them away after they landed on his shirt. Shino stayed silent and allowed his bugs to get to Zaku. "Is that the best you can do?" he asked, too scared to talk. As he let go of most of the bugs in his body, Shino shot back, "I don't fight with my words, I fight with my skills." As before, Zaku attempted to blow them away, but the bugs moved aside and continued to approach him. After hesitating, Zaku removed his right arm from the cloth and pointed it at Shino while pointing his left arm at the bugs. You'll have to choose. Fight me or the bugs. He released the air from his arms and remarked, I don't have to choose, I could just destroy you both. Strangely enough, nothing took place. Air began to escape from behind Zaku's elbow to his forearm and bicep before he could take any action. His two arms exploded, and he screamed in agony. Zaku examined his arms suspiciously and noticed insects obstructing the tube that expelled air from them. I sent my bugs to block your tubes when you weren't looking. Since they blocked the only means of air escaping, the air started to build up until it exploded and created holes in your arms to allow it to escape. This fight is over, Shino said as he returned to his seat in the bleachers. Hayate declared, the winner of the match, Shino Aburame. Kiba congratulated Shino and gave him a pat on the back. As Sakura and Kurenai also congratulated him, Shino nodded his head. After that, the board began selecting names at random to fight. vs Haku and Nozomi Kurosaki. Haku grinned, thrilled to be fighting next. She was a little perplexed, but that didn't stop her joy when she walked down and saw the enigmatic redhead nod his head and nod back. The enigmatic boy sensed that he was the target of murderous intent as she and Nozomi descended. When he looked up, the red-headed Suna was staring at him and then cocking his head, indicating that they should meet outside. The redhead gave Hinata a message in Morse code by nodding and tapping her hand. Both redheads vanished as Hinata nodded her head. Looking down, Hinata saw her teammate struggle against Kumo's powerful kunoichi. Numerous lightning bolts were flying from Nozomi's hands, but Haku avoided them. She was very good with lightning. If she made a mistake, it could end her exam chances. Gaara awaited the appearance of the other redhead. The sand in Gaara began to spasm out when the other boy showed up. Gaara held back from attacking the enigmatic boy with his sand. He simply waited in front of him, allowing the hooded boy to express his desires. The other red-headed person nodded his head, saying, I see you came, that's good. The redhead said, yeah I came, so what do you want? The redhead tensed but still nodded in response to the question, you are a Jinchuriki, are you not? Gaara's eyebrows were raised. So what's with the other silver-haired boy? He's giving out the same presents you are. Granted, his is lesser compared to yours, but the chakra and aura is there nonetheless. Gaara inquired. With a sigh, the boy hoped no one would see. Before I answer you, can you answer one of my own questions? Gaara gave a nod. How do you know I am a Jinchuriki, are you one yourself? The boy nodded, and his hair turned blonde. He was now wearing a mask that covered everything under his eyes. I am the host for the one-tailed demon, Shukaku. By the way, take out that ridiculous genjutsu, I already know you're not really who you appear to be. Rubbing the back of his head, Naruto admitted, I see I'm not as good with genjutsu as I thought. Gaara simply shook his head and arched an eyebrow. Gaara said icily, now, answer my question. Naruto sighed and became serious. He really didn't want to share his entire story, but it didn't seem like he could. Well, about half a year ago, I went to a faraway place to remake my swords. After I had them finished, I was walking home with my mom when a rock avalanche happened to occur during my trip. I was knocked out and don't remember much after that. Basically, he is like a clone of me. I host the nine-tailed fox, Kyuubi, and I'm guessing some or a lot of Kyuubi's chakra was drained from me and sent to the silver-haired Teme. Naruto clarified. There was an unreadable look on Gaara Geld's face. Even though his sand was still trembling, it remained firm. As his sand bounced to Naruto, Gaara said passively, interesting, but since you're not in the exams, I can kill you and enjoy your blood on my sand. Instinctively reaching for his swords, Naruto realized he was missing them and leapt out of the way of the sand. He stuck to a nearby tree after applying some chakra to the soles of his feet. He waited while Gaara attacked him with his sand once more. Jumping out of the way, Naruto began to make hand signals. Summoning jutsu, Naruto exclaimed as he used his hands to touch a tree and call forth Akio. Akio leapt to the air and landed with a roar. He noticed Naruto and a red-haired boy with sand floating around him when he looked around. He gave Naruto a suspicious look. Help me, Naruto exclaimed. He's crazy and wants to kill me. Akio puffed out his chest, took a deep breath, and nodded, saying, Attack formation Delta. Once more, Naruto gestured with his hands. Akio roared, Fire style. Fire bullet, as a huge fire bullet emerged from his mouth. Wind style. Air bullet. Akio and Naruto launched a joint attack that was aimed at Gaara. In order to shield himself, Gaara redirected his sand, and when the jutsu struck the sand wall, it exploded. As soon as the dust settled, The sand transformed into glass and broke as it hit the ground. Naruto, Gaara, and Akio stayed motionless and silent as the wind blew through the forest. A tiny leaf blew by, telling them to start again. Gaara raised his sand to repel Naruto as he ran at him. Naruto flipped over the sand in his path after sliding beneath it. He leapt back after throwing a kunai at Gaara. The kunai was caught in Gaara's sand, and he grinned triumphantly. As a paper attached to the kunai caught fire, Naruto exclaimed, "Boom!" Before the kunai exploded, Gaara glanced at it. Only a tiny amount of sand was turned to glass because it wasn't a significant explosion. Naruto grinned and Gaara sneered. After becoming serious, Naruto questioned, "Why are you fighting me?" Gaara responded solemnly once more, "Because mother screams for your blood." Naruto stood up and surveyed the area. Despite turning his entire body, he was unable to spot anyone. Confounded, Naruto remarked, "But I don't hear anyone screaming or see anyone at all." Gaara said, "But I hear her screaming in my head. It has to be Shukaku." A voice that Naruto had not heard in a while said, "This boy must not have been properly sealed when Shukaku was placed in him, and now the boy is going insane with Shukaku's constant chatter." "Kyuubi, where have you been?" Naruto thought. "I haven't spoken to you since the rock avalanche. Some of its chakra moved to your head when the rocks knocked you unconscious, temporarily blocking me from your mind." Naruto nodded in his head and noticed Gaara attempting to attack him once more. Gaara was stopped by Naruto's words, "Wait." Gaara's sand came back to him, and he crossed his arms. "What if I can help you? I can make the voices in your head stop talking to you, or at least limit it." He was intrigued by the idea and was considering it. At last, Gaara asked, "How?" Naruto snapped his fingers and scratched the back of his head. Naruto said, in a low voice, "I know somebody who's a master when it comes to seals. And peeping, but that doesn't count." Gaara's eyebrows cocked. "Why should I trust you?" Naruto gave Gaara a thumbs up and said, "Because, you're like me. You were shunned by your village and hated for the demon in you. I think we Jinchurikis should stick together." Gaara considered it once more. "Okay, but not now. After the preliminaries, that's when we'll do this." Gaara replied. Akio went back to his world after Naruto nodded. "By the way, my name's Naruto Uzumaki, Gaara of the desert." Naruto nodded before vanishing in a cloud of leaves, leaving Gaara to ponder what had happened. Is he someone I can truly trust? As he vanished and then reappeared inside the arena, he thought, Naruto Uzumaki. Reapplying the genjutsu, Naruto materialized beside Hinata. When she realized it was Naruto, she winced but then relaxed. Naruto grinned as she sighed and leaned into his shoulder. Takeo gave Naruto another odd glance. Who is this guy? As Gaara and Lee were summoned for the next battle, he pondered. Naruto asked Hinata, "So what happened while I was gone?" "Well, Haku lost against Nozomi after Nozomi applied some lightning into the ice crystals Haku made." He inquired anxiously, "Is she alright?" "Yes, she was just paralyzed for a while, long enough to declare Nozomi the winner. After that, Dosu went against Choji and won. Then it was Cross and Kiba, Masumi and Kankuro, and finally Tenten and Tamari. Cross, Kankuro and Tamari won their matches." Hinata summed up. With a nod, Naruto observed Lee striking Gaara like a pinball. Lee's strength and speed impressed him. Before Gaara struck the ground and struck him in the stomach with his bow staff, Lee wrapped his bandages around his waist. A cloud of dust formed around Gaara, sending him hurtling to the ground, and Lee landed a few feet away. Lee was grinning despite his panting. He was certain that he now had the match in the bag. He got to his feet and left. As the dust settled, Gaara extended his hand, and Lee's right arm and leg were covered in sand. Lee's arm and leg were crushed by the sand as Gaara closed his hand. "Ah!" Lee let out a painful scream. Suppressing the pain, he lowered himself and held his arm and leg. After sitting up and preparing to finish Lee with more sand, Gaara felt compelled to turn to face Naruto and noticed that he was shaking his head. Gaara glanced at Lee and then at Naruto. He heard the proctor say, but he wasn't sure if he should stop now. Gaara scoffed and returned to his spot in the stands after giving the proctor a fierce look. End of the match. The winner. Gaara of the desert. After letting out a sigh of relief, Naruto became alarmed upon realizing something. Only Hinata, Neji, and Takeo remained who had not engaged in combat. Naruto was worried about Takeo, but he trusted Neji to hold back if he fought Hinata because he knew that Neji was in the same family. The names of the final 3 candidates began to appear on the board at random. Naruto's eyes widened as it finally stopped and revealed the fighters from the previous matches. vs Takeo Ryusaki Hinata Hyuga. Takeo returned Hinata's smile as she glanced at him. She noticed that Naruto was not grinning when she looked at him. Asking, "What's wrong?" "Hinata-chan, please promise me you'll be careful. Don't mess around with Takeo. He'll hurt you whenever he gets the chance. Just be safe and please end it as quickly as you can and don't get too badly hurt," Naruto begged. Hinata gave him a serious look and gave him a nod. Naruto's arm stopped her and whirled her around just as she was ready to descend the stairs. He gave her a passionate kiss before she could ask him what he wanted. After she recovered from her shock, she returned his kiss and they parted ways. Naruto said, "I love you." Feeling a little dizzy, Hinata said, "I love you too." Takeo was furious inside after witnessing their private moment. With a sly grin, Takeo thought, "Well, let's just see how this turns out." After making her way to the arena, Hinata waited for the game to begin. She was considering how serious Naruto sounded in his warning. Hayate said to Hinata and Takeo, "If you're both ready, you may begin." While waiting for Takeo to adopt her stance, Hinata assumed her family's. After drawing both of his swords and bouncing them together, he assumed a stance akin to Naruto's. As he waited for the match to begin, Naruto inadvertently released a small amount of killing intent and told himself, "You better watch it, Takeo. If you seriously hurt her, I'll kill you." With every second that went by, Naruto's hold on the railing grew more and more firm. The fight appeared to be evenly matched thus far, with Takeo inflicting minor cuts on Hinata and Hinata landing a few blows. Fortunately for Naruto, he was aware that he was holding back. For Takeo anyhow. Every time Takeo got a crazy expression in his eyes or Hinata was struck, Naruto stiffened up. Based on Naruto's knowledge of Takeo, something wasn't quite right. Normally, Takeo would have enjoyed himself more with his opponent or defeated them by now, but he was stallish. He was hesitating for something, but Naruto didn't know what it was. In an attempt to disable Takeo's left arm, Hinata ducked under another quick blow and swung an open palm at it. In an attempt to cut her arm, Takeo leapt back, but she also leapt back. They exchanged looks and began fighting once more. For some reason, Takeo refused to stay down and continued moving forward even after Hinata closed a few chakra points on his arms and legs. Hinata was extremely perplexed. He shouldn't have been able to move if his chakra points were closed. She pondered whether Naruto had attempted to warn her about this. Takeo grinned as his scheme came to fruition. Hinata and her beloved Naruto would be eliminated if he could only hold off the battle long enough for Hinata to become exhausted. As Hinata kept closing his chakra points only to have Kyuubi's chakra reopen them, he grinned savagely. He dodged one open palm that was aimed at his head and dodged another that was aimed at his stomach. She attempted to kick his feet out from under him, and he flipped her over. The side of Hinata's pants was slightly cut off when he threw a kunai at her leg and it caught some of them. A small portion of his arm was cut when she threw a kunai back at him. The cut vanished after a moment of holding it in agony. Takeo was immediately back on Hinata, forcing her to go on the defensive, so she didn't have much time to consider that. She jumped over Takeo, flipped around, and kicked him behind his head after deflecting his side arc with her kunai. After taking 2 steps forward, he turned around and stabbed Hinata. After avoiding his swords once more, Hinata landed an elbow to his solar plexus. That final blow left him gasping for air, and he had to back off a few paces. Hinata was an amazing fighter, somewhat superior to Nozomi. He caught his second wind and grinned once more. He lunged to cut her in two, but she landed on the ground and raised her feet to launch him into the air. He was in the air for a long time, and when he returned, Hinata sent an open palm powered by chakra to his stomach. Takeo flew back, letting the blood escape his mouth. He stood up and wiped his lips of the blood. His patience with Hinata was beginning to wear thin. He might even want to kill her if she continued in this manner. After inhaling deeply, he made a series of hand gestures. He called out, "Shadow Clone Jutsu," as Hinata was surrounded by 7 additional Takeos. She grinned as she glanced around. She had trained with Naruto's clones numerous times, so this was probably no exception. With their swords raised and poised to cut, they each approached her. She leapt to her feet and avoided one of the clone's incoming swipes. She kicked 2 Takeos in the face, scattering them, after landing on the swords. When 2 people attempted to cut her, she ducked between them and stabbed the other, killing them as well. After one clone attempted to cut her in 2, she flipped back and watched from a small crater where she had once stood. She pulled out a few kunai and hurled them at the 3 Takeos that were left. In fact, one was stabbed and scattered. The other 2 deflected it, but Hinata was able to hit them on the same side because they were close to one another. She appeared between them out of nowhere and swung her open palms at the Takeos' stomachs. The original flew back, landing on his back and muttering obscenities as the clone poofed out of existence. I'm at my breaking point. Takeo grinned malevolently at the thought. She's kicking my ass and she hasn't even activated her Byakugan yet. Takeo straightened up and began to make a series of intricate and lengthy hand signals. Hinata couldn't recall where she had seen this jutsu, but she knew she had. The eyes of Naruto and all the Jonin widened. They were aware of the jutsu he was using. Some people were confused by Naruto's yell, "Hinata! Chan, run!" because they were unaware of his true identity due to his disguise. Hinata felt an incredible amount of chakra emanating from Takeo after looking up at Naruto. As she glanced at him, she noticed water and fire circling his open hand, which he abruptly closed. Elemental style. Baneway Molten Whirlpool Jutsu. Hinata exclaimed as the water and fire whirlpool sped toward her, widening her eyes. She jumped over the attack, but it abruptly changed direction. Before the attack completely engulfed her, she made a few hand signals. Hinata was burned to a crisp while many genin watched in shock. Then she was replaced by a log and a little poof. Takeo appeared startled before being struck in the back by a palm strike. He collapsed to his knees, coughed up blood, and turned to see Hinata flaring her Byakugan behind him. Takeo remarked nonchalantly, "I see you taking things seriously." Hinata shot back, "I see you have too." She didn't believe Takeo would make a real attempt on her life. Had the replacement jutsu not been used, she most likely would have fried or worse. She went back to her family's soft fist technique and bided her time until Takeo's next move. As Takeo and Hinata continued their battle, Naruto watched anxiously. He looked around to see how others were responding. Tenten appeared uninterested in the fight, but a little alarmed. Hinata was a concern for Ino, Haku, Sakura, and Kiba. Choji and Shikamaru were both asleep. He was Choji, after all. The look on Neji's face made Naruto furious. Neji appeared content with the battle, as if Hinata deserved to come dangerously close to death. He clenched his jaw and made an effort to control himself. He returned his attention to the match and saw Takeo appear to be hit by Hinata's gentle fist. Hinata and Takeo separated for a while. Hinata appeared to be quite upset about the killing incident. The thought crossed Takeo's mind when he saw Hinata running at him once more. Leaping into the air, he first applied some of Kyuubi's chakra to his hand before applying some of his own. He hurled the green flames at Hinata. Before being struck, she leapt out of the way. She tossed a couple of kunai after rolling. Takeo unsheathed his swords, deflected them, and landed a few feet away from Hinata. He was growing weary of battling her. She had far more endurance than she gave off, and he hadn't anticipated her staying this long. He created roughly 3 shadow clones because he could take no more of this. Hinata instantly sent an open palm at his chest after he sent one to her. The clone actually exploded, rather than emitting the typical puff of smoke. A crater was formed when Hinata was launched into the cement wall. Naruto's gaze expanded. He wouldn't. Breathing heavily and wearing her left arm, Hinata emerged from the crater. As Takeo launched his other 2 clones at her, she dropped to her knees and watched. She jumped over the first clone's attempt to headbutt her, shoved him against the wall, and waited for the explosion. But all she heard was it poof. Before the second clone exploded with her back to it, she was perplexed by this. She made another crater when she flew into the concrete wall. She stumbled out of it, fell to her knees, and then collapsed face down. After a 10-second wait, Hayate declared the match over. But before he could accomplish that, Hinata fought to stand up until she was once more upright. She ignored Hayate's attempts to persuade her to try again the following year. She waited for Takeo to continue, adopting her family's stance. Neji said softly, but Naruto could hear it, "HMPF, she should have stayed down, she has no idea what she's getting herself into." Naruto questioned angrily, "What did you say?" Neji arched an eyebrow before ignoring Naruto entirely. Naruto heard Takeo speak again just as he was about to scream. "Sunshine, just give up, I don't want to kill you." Then, through labored breathing, she said, "Yeah, right." Takeo shook his head as she spat blood out of her mouth. Takeo made a strange hand gesture and Hinata was about to ask him what he was doing when she felt her legs go numb. "Okay, but don't say I didn't warn you." She was unable to move them at all, but she did not fall. Her arms and torso also became totally numb a second later. She was only able to move her head, and even then, not very much. She questioned, "What did you do?" Takeo was grinning and making hand signals. "I won. Lightning style. Lightning needle jutsu." Takeo's hands exploded with needles, some of which struck Hinata, 2 of which passed through her left leg, 2 more through her left and right shoulder, and 1 that just missed her heart. The remaining lightning needles were deflected by Naruto's armor as he intervened with a battle tiger. The battle tiger vanished after the barrage ended, and Naruto was glaring at Takeo in a furious manner. Gaara and the other genin looked on with curiosity. To save Hinata, a random man simply leapt into the fray. However, Gaara questioned why Naruto would put his life in danger to save someone who was practically dead. He mentally noted that he should question him about that later. How someone so young could call forth animals, let alone a tiger, baffled the Hokage and Jonin. That contract hasn't been seen in more than 4 years. Naruto questioned, when did you inject her? But Takeo simply shrugged. I don't know what you're talking about. Then, to check on Hinata, Naruto turned away from him. Her pulse was still there, albeit weak, when he checked it. Despite his lack of medical knowledge, Naruto became alarmed and realized that he might lose Hinata permanently if he didn't take action right away. He didn't care when he heard Hayate declare Takeo the winner. His thoughts were racing, but he was unable to identify a viable option. It only resulted in either his or Hinata's death. Naruto was happy to hear that someone had an idea. Hey brat, I got an idea. What is it? What? He inquired. Although it takes a lot of chakra and chakra control, I am aware of a jutsu that could help your vixen. You could die from chakra exhaustion if you can't handle it. Naruto shook his head. I'm all for it if it keeps my Heim alive, so I don't care. What is jutsu? In order to prevent him from overexerting himself, Kyuubi instructed him to place his hands over the wounds and sent mental pictures of the hand signs. When he followed Kyuubi's hand signals, an orange barrier materialized in his hands. Naruto witnessed Hinata's wound begin to mend as if it had never occurred when he covered it with his hands, barely missing her heart. He continued with the others after that one appeared to be fine. Just as the darkness was about to overtake Naruto, he noticed red chakra moving around him and felt his chakra reserves replenish. Naruto felt his chakra reserves draining and was suddenly exhausted. His next observation was that Hinata's wound healed more quickly and the orange barrier abruptly turned redder. Initially taken aback, he assumed it was the demon inside of him. Stupid. For the time being, Naruto ignored Kyuubi, focusing on bringing Hinata back. I warned you not to overdo it. When Hinata woke up, Naruto was standing over her, covering her wounds with a red, orange barrier. As he completed the jutsu, Naruto saw that Hinata had woken up and grinned. He had done enough. Now it was her turn to rest and complete the healing. Naruto whispered, how are you holding up Hinata, Chan? As she feebly looked for Naruto's hand, Hinata grinned. She quickly squeezed her hand when Naruto took it in his. She answered, closing her eyes for a moment, be better. Now that why? You're here. She opened them with a snap, then resisted the impulse to shut them again. Naruto gave a low laugh. Naruto kissed the back of her hand and said, it's okay my Heim, you can go to sleep, everything is fine now. Before turning in for the night, Hinata thanked him with a smile. Weakly, Naruto lifted Hinata and allowed the medic ninjas to carry her to one of the healing rooms on a stretcher. Then, aimed straight at Takeo, Naruto emitted an amazing amount of killing intent. Naruto said in a dangerously low voice, you bastard. Takeo simply grinned and shook his head when Naruto said, I warned you. I warned you not to hurt her but you almost killed her. Don't you even feel even a bit remorseful? Before heading to the stands, he merely said, nope. Serves her right. She knew exactly what she was getting herself into but the fool continued to fight anyways. Naruto understood what Neji was saying. Naruto needed to find a way to relieve his growing impatience. Hayate began to say, I guess that's it for, but Naruto cut him off. Naruto said to Hayate, wait a minute, let me compete. Hayate's eyebrow cocked. Bad idea kid. Kyuubi warned him, you're almost out of chakra and if you keep using mine, you'll transform. Naruto refused to listen. I know what I'm doing, so don't worry, sorry, but there's not a good reason to let you. I'm not even sure if you're allowed to be here. Who are you anyways? Naruto gave up his genjutsu. My name's Naruto Uzumaki, I was born in Konoha. I deserve a chance to participate in these exams, he said. Hayate continued to appear incredulous. Abruptly, a man with white hair entered the arena. As the majority of Jonin looked on in disbelief, Jiraiya said, let the kid fight. Come on, look at him, he's a natural-born fighter. Hayate glanced at the third Hokage and said, besides, the brat was with me, cut him some slack. Both Hayate and the third shrugged. I guess we might as well. Last match, Neji Hyuga vs Naruto Uzumaki. When Naruto saw Neji's shocked face, he grinned. Neji emerged from shock and made his way to the arena, saying, get down here, Hyuga. He was 10 feet or more away from Naruto. Naruto dismissed his statement, saying, you know, this is really pointless. Destiny has already determined me as the victor. All you're doing is wasting time. I don't care, let's just fight. Naruto immediately attacked after hearing the words, "If the contestants are ready, you may start the match." He vanished and then resurfaced behind the Hyuga prodigy. He shot his fist forward, aiming it directly at Neji's head after rearing it back. Unfortunately, Neji ducked as he saw the impending punch and activated his Byakugan. Then he pivoted on his heels and attempted to seal the chakra points in Naruto's heart, but Naruto vanished once more and was on the other side of the arena. Neji was astounded by Naruto's speed. He might lose if he didn't take action right away. A huge ball of fire shot toward him, and he leapt back. Neji turned around and closed the majority of the chakra points in his right arm as Naruto approached from behind. While briefly distracted and experiencing numbness in his arm, Naruto gave Neji exactly what he needed. With the exception of Naruto and the green seal beneath him, everything for Neji turned black and white. Neji ran the short distance between him and Naruto and began to close many of Naruto's chakra points. "Just face it, fate and destiny have shown me the way to defeat you. You're in my field of divinity." 8 trigrams. 64 palms, Neji said. Neji concluded his attack with the words, 2 palms, 4 palms, 8 palms, 16 palms, 32 palms, 64 palms. Naruto hit the ground with a dull thud. Neji stood over Naruto's motionless form, grinning triumphantly. Before he could move, Neji was launched through the air and onto the ground by Naruto's unexpected explosion. As he stood up, he noticed a crater where Naruto had once been. Neji was suddenly propelled into the air by a knee. Neji was launched higher into the air with a second kick to his stomach. Before Naruto appeared over Neji, he gave him one last kick to the chin before kicking him over the head with an axe and letting him fall quickly to the ground. A final Naruto kicked Neji in the stomach just before his head struck the floor, sending him flying through the air and into the concrete wall. After Naruto fell, Neji looked up at him. He was immobile and in excruciating pain throughout his body. Guy and Tenten were taken aback. Naruto eliminated Neji, a high-level genin, as though he were still enrolled in the academy. As Naruto approached Neji, Tenten and Guy looked on with curiosity. Naruto said, "Neji," to get his attention. As medic ninjas placed Neji on a stretcher, Naruto remarked, "If you can remember anything from today, remember this. Fate and destiny do not control our lives or tell us how we should live, they just give us the option to follow the path they made for us." With a sigh, Naruto expressed his disappointment that Neji had not fought harder. He was taken aback by the 64 trigrams, but it wasn't enough to win. His muscles tightened, and he squinted his eyes. He had to let go of some tension and rage, even though he knew he had pushed it with that final blow. Winner of the match, Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto said, "Whatever," and then vanished in a tiny tornado. After a moment of surprise, Hayate shook his head. Haku held up her hand and asked, "Can someone tell him who he has to fight in the finals?" Hayate then called the finalist down from the stands and explained who would face whom. Naruto stirred and felt someone poke him. Then he jumped out of his seat and onto the floor when he felt someone put something cold on his back. He noticed Haku grinning over him when he looked up. She said, "Well, hello, sleepyhead." Returning to his seat beside Hinata's hospital bed, Naruto returned the smile. 2 days after the preliminary examination, she remained unconscious. Naruto began to fear that Takeo had done something irreversible. Although Hinata was closed to visitors until today, Haku would have been able to visit sooner. Naruto was present because he would change into a nurse or another object, such as a lamp, whenever a doctor was about to enter. "So, is there a reason you came down here or did you want to say hi to me after 6 months?" he inquired. Haku swayed her body back and forth while placing her hands behind her back. A little of both. It's been a while since we last seen each other and it's really good to see you again, Naruto. Haku replied with a grin. "It's nice to see you too, Haku. So what's the other reason why you came looking for me?" Naruto scowled at Takeo's name before grinning and saying, "I came here to tell you that you're fighting Takeo in the preliminaries." Haku went to the window and opened it, her smile growing. As she leapt out of the window, she said, "And just to warn you." He wondered, warn me? About what? But he was spared the trouble for a while. Naruto. A woman's voice filled his ears. The voice sounded angry, so Naruto flinched and hoped there was another Naruto inside the building. Unfortunately, there was only one Naruto because Kushina was there, searching frantically for him as the hospital door to the room he was in flew open. She only needed a millisecond to spot him, be by his side, and give him a hug. "Naruto, it really is you," she cried, giving Naruto a hug. Naruto tried to reassure his mother by saying, "Mom, you'll wake up Hinata-chan. I know you missed me, I missed you too, but this is still a hospital." Then he felt something wet touch his shoulder and his mother tremble. Mom. I was worried. I thought you died, Naruto-chan. I didn't want to go through it again. I already lost your father, and I thought I lost you. I wasn't sure what I would have done. It's okay, Mom. I'm here now. You don't have to do anything but buy me clothes, clean the house and feed me. Naruto laughed. His mother slapped him lightly on the head and laughed. He gave her a tighter hug and laughed too. She then looked at Hinata's sleeping form and grinned, saying, "Yeah, right, you'll clean the house and make food for the both of us. Or maybe someday, Hinata'll do all that stuff for you, after you too," implied Kushina. Mom. Cried Naruto softly. Kushina chuckled once more. Naruto stiffened as she went on, "I'm kidding. For now anyways. I'm sure you both have a lot of time to." He smiled despite his serious tone, saying, "Mom, I'm serious." Then he heard a chuckle and turned to see Hinata trying to hide her laughter by covering her mouth with her hand. Naruto felt his mother release him, and he stood on the other side of Hinata's bed, saying, "Sorry, I didn't mean to break up the moment." Before Haku entered, he took a seat in the chair she was occupying. Without hesitation, he grabbed Hinata's hand and clasped it in his own. Kushina grinned at the idyllic scene before her, which, strangely enough, inspired her. "How are you feeling, Hinata?" Hinata asked, grinning at Naruto's erratic behavior. The final "Hime" or "chan" would occasionally be used when he pronounced her name. Nothing about Naruto was ever predictable, and although she never said it out loud, she loved it when he did. Better than before. Her smile vanished, and she turned her head away from Naruto, leaving him perplexed. Naruto interrupted her as she was saying, I'm sorry, Naruto-kun. I must look weak to you. I tried my best but. Hinata-chan, it's okay, there's nothing to be ashamed of. I even had a hard time fighting him," he replied. Hinata gave him a startled look and said, "You even seem to do better than I did." She said, "Why? You've fought him before." She wasn't sure how to respond when Naruto nodded his head. Fortunately, Kushina beat her to it, so she did have to. Naruto winced as she said, "What do you mean you fought him before? And where have you been for the last 6 months?" "I've been in Kumo for the last 5 months. In the last month, was replaced, I guess you could say, with Takeo. I'd really like to tell you everything but I don't want to repeat it over and over again, so I'd like to hold a meeting between the Hokage and anyone else who wants to know," he continued. After giving a nod, Kushina made her way to the door. Gazing at her, Naruto grinned and said, "Naruto-kun." He said, before sensing her lower his mask and plant a kiss on his lips. After a moment of surprise, he grinned broadly and returned her kiss. They noticed 2 flashes disappear out of the corner of their eyes. When it broke their kiss, they turned to see Kushina holding a camera and grinning triumphantly. Just before she vanished, she exclaimed, "I finally see your face and got 2 cute pictures of you too. Bye." With a sigh, Naruto turned to face Hinata. She was perplexed, but Naruto grinned and continued the kiss they had been sharing. Sasuke felt a tremendous amount of chakra emanating from the hospital, which caused him to wake up. Although he couldn't recall where, he felt as though he had previously sensed this chakra. But there was a patient in the hospital whose chakra truly surpassed Zabuza's and everyone else's. He was intrigued and pondered who it might be. But the fact that someone was stronger than him also infuriated him. He watched Sakura enter his room with Ino and Haku as the door opened. Haku appeared uneasy, but Sakura and Ino were both carrying flowers. Sakura said, "Hey Sasuke-kun, how you feeling?" Sasuke responded with a sneer. She put her bouquet on the desk beside his bed. Soon after, Ino grinned and followed. Somberly, Haku said, "I'm glad to see you're okay." Sasuke's eyebrow arched. He questioned why he was receiving such cold treatment from Haku. Since he was still exhausted from his match and the exams, he remained silent about it. "Oh, Sasuke, we came here to tell you that you're fighting that Gaara guy." Passively, he said, "Thanks. Oh, and that Naruto came back and is in the exams too." Haku replied. Sasuke's eyes grew wide as he gave Haku a disbelieving look. It dawned on him then that Naruto owned the enormous chakra. How much more powerful is he? Before sensing the presence of another well-known chakra, Sasuke pondered. When he recognized who it was, his eyes grew wide. Yeah, but so what? It's not like he could win the thing anyways. He's just going to lose to that weird Kumo guy. What's his name? Takeo, I think. Ino replied. 3 kunoichi were left perplexed as Sasuke leapt from his bed and fled his room. Sasuke saw someone standing over the ledge after running all the way to the hospital's roof. When Itachi turned around and Sasuke noticed his Sharingan activated, he remarked, "It's been a while." "Little brother." Sasuke turned his on and gazed at his sibling. "So I finally get a chance to defeat you, brother. I finally get the chance to avenge our clan for what you've done." Sasuke replied. Itachi shook his head and closed his eyes. Itachi opened his eyes and said, "I'm sorry, Sasuke, but I don't have time to play with you right now. Besides," as his 3 tomos began to spin, "you're in no condition to fight." Sasuke began to feel a little dizzy. After closing his eyes for a while, he saw Itachi vanish, leaving him by himself on the rooftop. He snarled, feeling guilty for allowing himself to be caught in yet another genjutsu. He muttered a curse and made the decision to take it easy in preparation for the finals, which he had a month to get ready for. He paused at a door on his way back to his room. He sensed a great deal of chakra in it, but it vanished a moment later. His teammate's file was hanging next to the room, and he noticed that it was his. When Sasuke knocked on Hinata's door, he thought, that couldn't be her. He was perplexed when he heard someone laugh and someone giggle, which he assumed to be Hinata. He heard Hinata say, "See. Come in." To his surprise, Naruto was lying next to Hinata when he opened the door. With her head resting on Naruto's chest, Hinata gave him a hug. Naruto grinned and put his arms around her waist. "Sup, Sasuke? How you been?" Naruto asked, grinning and wearing a mask over his lower face, as Hinata waved. It was impossible for Sasuke not to smile. Even though he would never acknowledge it, everything seemed dull and uninteresting without Naruto. He was happy that he was back home, but he wouldn't go so far as to say that he missed him. Sasuke said, "Hey." Sasuke tried to sound sincere when he said, "I just wanted to make sure Hinata was okay and to see if the rumors of you returning were true. I heard you were badly beaten." He sensed the rise and fall of Naruto's desire to kill. Despite raising an eyebrow, he remained silent. Nodding his head, Sasuke said, "Yeah, I'm okay. Thanks for worrying, Sasuke." He then walked out of the room. Naruto removed his mask and planted a kiss on Hinata, asking, "Now, where were we?" Just as they were leaving, he had a sudden thought. Naruto sighed after saying, "Oh, I just remembered, I got something for you but I got to pick it up." Hinata laughed as he remarked, "But I don't want to leave you." Naruto interrupted her to call for a clone to go get him the gift, saying, "It's okay, Naruto-kun." The clone leapt out after opening the window. Then Naruto rested his head on top of Hinata's and sighed happily. She gave Naruto a tight hug while grinning. Before long, both were smiling and had fallen back asleep. Naruto didn't feel a familiar presence in his room for a long time. Itachi was patiently waiting for him to wake up when he slowly opened one eye. He opened his eyes fully after yawning. "Itachi. Sensei, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here for another week." Naruto sighed. "I just came here to tell you that I won't be able to train you for the next couple of weeks. Akatsuki has me going after some tailed beast in Kumo. Normally, I wouldn't be sent, but something has happened that needs me to go with my partner, Kisame. So this might be the last time I train you for a while, so let's go," Itachi said as he headed toward the window. Naruto halted Itachi and said, "Wait. Right now? But I can't leave Hinata Chan here, it wouldn't feel right," Naruto replied. "Well," Itachi informed him, "it's now or never. I'll be at the training spot where we first trained. I'll only wait for half an hour before I decide to head back. Choose wisely, Naruto," Itachi said as he disappeared. Naruto let out a sigh as he considered his predicament. He had to study hard for the tests. However, he was reluctant to leave Hinata's side. He chose to abandon Hinata in a clone, and then he leapt out the window to pursue Itachi. The other chakra signature was waiting outside Hinata's window, but Naruto didn't see it. With a sly smile, the individual leapt into the room, pulled out the shadow clone, and laughed. When Hinata was awakened by the laughter, she was shocked to see Naruto not by her side and Takeo standing across from her. Takeo had one of his swords aimed at her throat and another at her heart, so she was unable to finish her sentence. Takeo, what? With a menacing grin, he touched Hinata's skin with the tip of his sword. Takeo smashed his lips over hers before she could even think. Hinata tried to push him away as her eyes grew wide, but her arms felt heavy once more. With the tip of one sword still aimed at her neck, he began tracing her body after he had stopped kissing her. The other sword brushed against her thigh after passing through her stomach. Hinata's eyes were stained with tears. With tears in her eyes, Hinata said, Please, don't." Takeo tilted his head and grinned smugly. Takeo said, "Don't what, sunshine," after tearing a portion of Hinata's trousers. Takeo was enjoying the entire moment when she gave a painful gasp. He was sent to the opposite side of the room by a punch before he realized what had happened. He saw Naruto looking irate when he looked up. Hinata said, "N. Naruto. Kun." Instead, Naruto turned to face her, but his heart was pierced by 2 swords before he could speak. Hinata let out another cry and screamed. With his eyes wide with shock, Naruto dropped back from the swords, poofed, and a small package dropped to the ground. Hinata and Takeo were both taken aback, but Takeo bounced back first. As he made his way slowly to Hinata's bed, Takeo remarked, "Well, that was interesting. I was kind of hoping that was the real Naruto. Oh well." He cut more of Hinata's clothing when he arrived, leaving her wearing some of her pants and a shirt that was slightly less than half its original size. Fortunately for her, she was still able to conceal herself. Hinata noticed the lust in Takeo's eyes as he eyed her. Hinata screamed, "S. Stay. Stay away, you monster." Takeo was taken aback, but he continued. In fact, it inspired him. Hinata shook her head, but he said, "Hey now sunshine, why are you calling me a monster when Naruto is the real monster? Don't believe me, huh? Well, let me ask you this. What do you think happened to the Kyuubi who attacked all those years ago?" Hinata responded, a little perplexed as to why he would inquire. He was killed. By the Yondaime. Wrong. In fact, Kyuubi couldn't have been killed, so they settled on sealing it inside a new born baby. This baby, Sunshine, was born on October the 10th, 12 years ago. Takeo replied slowly. And gradually, it began to sink into Hinata's consciousness. Unbelieving, Hinata uttered, You're lying." "I'm not lying," Takeo said, leaving Hinata stunned. "Have you not noticed the whisker marks on his face, or the extraordinary amount of chakra and stamina he possesses? How about when he gets angry, his eyes turn red and his pupils are slits? Do you think I'm lying now?" "I thought so." A bunch of sand rushed at him before he could react or say anything more, and he leapt back just in time to avoid being covered by the sand. Then, the sand appeared to shield Hinata by moving to her side. Startled, Takeo turned to look at Gaara, who was staring at him passively from his left. "Pathetic, trying to take advantage of an injured victim. I should kill you right now," Gaara replied. Taking in his words, Takeo grinned. Takeo, who was genuinely curious but irritated, asked, "Gaara of the desert, what brings you to this room?" Gaara gave Hinata a quick glance before responding. "I was looking for Naruto, and since I saw how important she seemed to be, I figured he'd be here. Then I heard a scream come from this room. Unfortunately, I ran into a weasel instead of a fox," he said while addressing Gaara. Gaara glanced at her before his sand rose up to shield him from Takeo's sneak attack. "Gee, Gaara," he asked. "Very good, Gaara, but why don't you kill me now? What's stopping you from killing me?" Takeo responded. Gaara didn't respond right away. Instead, he pushed him back with his sand and hurled 2 sand shuriken at him. With another smirk, Takeo cut both shuriken in half. Gaara smirked in his head when he felt someone outside observing them, but mainly Hinata. "Nothing's stopping me. I'm just not the one who's going to end your pitiful existence," replied Gaara. "Oh yeah, then who?" Takeo repeated, but nobody could respond as a lightning fast punch powered by chakra struck him squarely in the left cheek. Then he sped through the hospital wall, and then another, until he came to a stop on the 4th wall. With the assistance of a nearby desk, he stumbled to his feet and peered through the walls, his eyes wide. As Naruto's hands were illuminated by green fire, the hospital's murderous intent reached new heights. Hinata noticed that Naruto's eyes had slit pupils and were glowing red. Hinata saw Naruto sharpen his nails and grow fangs through his mask. "I'm going to kill you right where you stand, regardless of how long our fight lasts." Holding his right fist back, Naruto screamed and charged at Takeo. As the hospital's foundation shook from the inside out, everyone inside trembled in terror. Everyone sensed the air was heavy with intent to kill. With his foxfire still burning, Naruto threw his arm forward and watched as Takeo just stared back, motionless. Naruto's eyes cried out for Takeo's blood, and it might happen in a few seconds. The key word here is could. Naruto's hand was hovering over the spot where Takeo's heart should have been when a hand suddenly sprang forward and stopped it. Kakashi pushed Naruto's hand away from Takeo, and Naruto sneered. Naruto stared icily at Kakashi and said, "That's enough, Naruto. We don't want to start a war against Kumo." Kakashi and Naruto simply stared at one another until Naruto sighed and extinguished his foxfire. "I know that, but I still want to kill him." Then Kakashi released him and sighed too. He noticed that Takeo had gone away just as he turned to question him. As Naruto removed his long cloak, Kakashi remarked, "This could be a problem." He was dressed in black cargo pants and a sleeveless black muscle shirt underneath his cloak. Naruto, you should really have more self-control. You probably could have destroyed the hospital with your killing intent alone. Kakashi chided him. Ignoring him, Naruto draped his cloak over Hinata. Still, she was too stunned to react to the outside world. Naruto turned to face his sensei and said, I don't care, he tried to do something inappropriate to my hime and that is where I draw the line. He better hope I don't see him before the finals. He asked Kakashi, speaking of which, what are you going to teach me for the finals? Kakashi had a contemplative look on his face and shook his head. Naruto, I don't know how to tell you this but... Naruto concluded on his behalf, you're not going to train me. The room grew chilly as Kakashi nodded. Naruto asked angrily, so what about Hinata? Chan, are you just going to abandon her too? Kakashi made an effort to soothe him, but his final query caught him off guard. It wasn't very wise of Kakashi to say, but she didn't make it to the finals. Naruto clenched his fist and teeth, and his eyes narrowed. So what if she didn't make it to the finals? You think that excuses you from teaching her anything? You are our sensei. It's your responsibility to teach us new things, regardless if we did or did not make it to the finals. So what are you going to do with your newfound time? Naruto inquired without even attempting to be civil. Gaara was aware of Naruto's feelings of betrayal and questioned why he was so strongly affected. Sooner or later, people were going to turn on you. I'll be training Sasuke for his match against Gaara. You've seen what he did to Lee. Sasuke is going to need my help if he wants to win. We have to make sure he wins. Kakashi defended himself. As Kakashi said the wrong thing to the wrong person once more, Gaara shook his head. We are just you Kakashi because I'm really okay with Sasuke just surviving. He doesn't have to win, just survive. Naruto replied with venom. Kakashi recoiled at the hate in his voice and was taken aback by the suffix's absence. Don't be like that Naruto, I got you a replacement so you'll get the proper training for the finals. With no response from Kakashi, Naruto questioned, but I'm betting that you didn't get one for Hinata. That's what I thought. You know what? Screw you and your replacement, even though any replacement who arrives on time would already be a better sensei than you. Kakashi cut him off, saying, Naruto, I'm warning you. However, this only made him more irate and determined to argue. Kakashi sensed Kyuubi's chakra slipping away from Naruto, but it vanished in an instant. You're warning me? You are warning me? So do you suddenly care about me or are you warning me to stop because I hurt your pride? Kakashi asked. Naruto approached Hinata and took her in his arms, saying, You know what, I don't need you or your replacement. I did well the last 6 months without you and I could still do better without you. He gave her a tight hug, holding her as though she would vanish if he released his hold, and whispered to her, I won't let anything harm you anymore, I promise. Before turning to face the window, he gave Kakashi another glance. Gaara nodded his head, and the three of them vanished as Kakashi stood motionless. Some sensei you turned out to be. Come on Gaara, a promise is a promise. On top of the Hokage monument, Naruto, Gaara, and Hinata, who was still in Naruto's arms, suddenly materialized. Naruto noticed that Hinata was contemplating something as he looked down at her. He found it strange that she was so silent. She usually says something, but she hasn't said anything, at least this quietly. Then he sat on the fourth's head and glanced back up at Gaara. Naruto was refreshed by a summer breeze as the sun was just beginning to set. Naruto said to him, Gaara, would it be okay if I spent some time by myself with Hinata? Chan? After giving this some thought, Gaara nodded. I'll be back in 10 minutes. That's as much patience as I have. Naruto said, that's fine. Gaara hushed and left the area. With a sigh, Naruto shook Hinata. Hinata. Chan? Hinata appeared to be startled out of her reverie and turned to face Naruto. Why? Yes? He said, are you okay? She answered him with a hesitant, why? Yeah. Naruto was concerned about this. As though wishing the world away, Hinata closed her eyes and turned her head away, asking, Hinata. Chan, what happened while I was gone? She whispered, Takeo, he told me yes. Something about you. Naruto asked, about me? What did he say? Naruto's eyes widened and his mouth fell open as she responded, he told me that. You had the Kyuubi sealed in you. Naruto sighed after giving her a quick glance. Is it true? He asked. He was about to respond when Kyuubi asked him a question. Are you certain of this? Do you believe telling her is a wise move? Now that the Teme told her, it's not like I can avoid it. In addition to, Naruto responded solemnly, she needs to know what she's getting herself into. What if she leaves you because she can't accept the idea? Naruto had never considered that, and now that he had, it hurt to think about it. Then, I'll have to let her go, I suppose. If she concludes that you are the reason she doesn't love me, then I won't stop her. Naruto spoke again, bracing himself for the worst when Kyuubi stopped talking. The eyes of Hinata widened as she said, yes, it's true. 12 years ago, the fourth Hokage sealed the Kyuubi in me. But why? She asked again. I'm not sure why, but I was chosen to carry the burden of having a tailed beast in me. I accepted this. Hinata continued to talk to herself, but Naruto overheard her, so this is why you are hated in the village. Nearly too scared to ask, Naruto said, yeah, so do you hate me too? Hinata quickly put her arms around his waist and buried her face against his chest. She surprised Naruto by saying, oh, of course not, loudly. Hinata raised her head off his chest and met his eyes, saying, Naruto-kun, I don't care if you have an angel or a demon in you. You are still you, regardless of what people think. You are the one who always saves me, the one who's always there for me, the one I fell in love with. Naruto found it difficult to accept what he had just heard. She still loved Kyuubi even after accepting him. He believed that this was the happiest he could be. Hinata gently kissed him on the lips after slowly lowering his mask. Naruto gave her a gentle kiss in return. He couldn't stop the smile from coming to his lips because he could feel Hinata's. Both felt the electricity they always get when they kiss, so it didn't matter if it was a gentle kiss. Naruto put his mask back on as they parted, and a moment later, Gaara emerged, his arms folded across his chest. Naruto exclaimed, right on time, Gaara, with a smile. Raising an eyebrow, Gaara pondered what had become of Naruto. He assumed it had something to do with the girl. Then he recalled his question for him. Gaara perplexed Naruto and Hinata by asking, Naruto Uzumaki, why did you save that girl during the preliminaries? His hold on Hinata tightened as he said, why, because she means the world to me. Hinata felt safe and secure in his arms and could sense the assurance and love in his voice. But why? Everyone is bound to betray one another. You should only love yourself because you can only count on yourself. Gaara replied. Naruto got to his feet and assisted Hinata in doing the same. However, Hinata spoke up before Naruto or Gaara did. Surprising Naruto, she said, that's what I thought too. Naruto lowered his head until his lips were close to her ears and said, my father became cold and distant after my mother died and only cared about the success of his children. After I failed to meet his expectations, he decided to give up on me and train Hanabi, my younger sister. Naruto mumbled, you never told me this. She replied in a whisper, I apologize for not talking about it. I don't really enjoy doing so. My father then got me a trainer named Kurenai Yuhi to train me. He decided that since I couldn't be a good Hyuga, then I might as well contribute to the village by becoming a ninja. The one that was supposed to love me and take care of me left me in the care of another. I wondered how I could trust another person again. Hinata continued as tears welled up in her eyes. Hinata's story captivated both Naruto and Gaara. That's when I started to think less and less of myself and began to berate myself for every little mistake I made. I would have become an empty shell with no self-esteem, no love. She then grasped Naruto's hand and gave it small squeeze, Naruto squeezing it back. If it wasn't for Naruto-kun, I didn't think anyone would love me, much less like me if Naruto-kun hadn't showed up in my life. I owe him my life and the best I can give him is my love and my trust. I just hope that is enough. Naruto drew Hinata into his embrace. He closed his eyes contentedly and remarked, that's more than enough. In fact, it's more than I could even ask for. Neither appeared to be lying or exaggerating, and Gaara viewed the exchange with a calculating eye. They appeared to be as dependent on one another as they were on air, if not more so. The point is Gaara. There's always someone out there to love, to trust. It just might be harder for some than for most. Naruto stated to him. Naruto could sense the sadness in his monotone voice as he said, but I am a Jinchuriki, who would love a demon container. I am a Jinchuriki and I have someone who loves me. Maybe you just have to look hard for that precious person. Naruto reassured him. For a brief moment, Naruto believed he saw a glimmer of hope in Gaara's eyes as she met his gaze. When he and Naruto sensed someone approaching, it vanished. Jiraiya then emerges from the forest behind Naruto, and his vein emerges. Arrow. Sennin, come out already, I know it's you hiding in the trees. Jiraiya shouted, I told you not to call me that. Naruto calmly replied, and I told you not until you give up that habit of yours. Jiraiya was about to continue when she saw Naruto holding a Hinata who was hardly dressed. Jiraiya wiggled his eyebrow and said, so, what are you doing with a cloak only wearing girl in your arms, Naruto? Looking down at Hinata, Naruto blushed and realized that she was only wearing his cloak. This also caught Hinata's attention, and her blush was 10 times more intense than Naruto's. She eventually passed out in his arms. Naruto shouted, "Arg! See what you did, Arrow, Senin." Jiraiya slammed his forehead against Naruto's and exclaimed, "I said not to call me that." Pushing back, Naruto shouted. "And I said hell no." They kept hitting each other in the head while their eyes were glimmering. Then, sensing Hinata stir, Naruto pivoted on his heels, stepping aside to allow Jiraiya to strike the stone floor head. First. Then Jiraiya painfully held his head. Naruto said, "Hinata. Hime." Hinata opened her eyes slowly. Her legs still felt a little weak when she attempted to stand. Despite her blush, she said, I'm okay, Naruto-kun. She was too exhausted from everything that had transpired to notice that she was still hardly dressed. As she rose from the ground, Jiraiya remarked, "So you're Hinata, Naruto wouldn't shut up about you." Hinata questioned, He's talked about me?" A second Naruto materialized behind Jiraiya and struck him in the head. "Talked? He wouldn't shut up about you. It was always Hinata's pretty and this or Hinata's brave and that. This kid would even say your name in his sleep." Jiraiya spun around and struck the clone in the face, causing him to poof, after Naruto struck him, causing a big bump to form. This made Hinata laugh, and she couldn't resist kissing Naruto on the cheek. He looked shocked, and she laughed again. He simply laughed sheepishly when she said, "You're very sweet, Naruto-kun." Naruto pointed to Gaara and said, "Oh yeah, there's a reason why I called you here, Arrow. Senin, and it was not to harass me or Hinata. Hime. I need you to take a look at Gaara's seal." Gaara could say that the exchange between Jiraiya and Naruto was amusing because she had stayed silent the entire time. Jiraiya questioned, the Jinchuriki for Suna. What's wrong with it? His seal is not complete. Apparently, they seal him while he was still in his mother's womb, so they didn't have much to work with. From what he's told me, Shukaku is always talking to him and it's driving him insane. And from what I can see, it doesn't let him sleep. If I sleep, Shukaku would destroy my personality and take over, Gaara said. Gaara was eyed by Jiraiya, who instructed him to present his seal. Gaara revealed the seal over his right shoulder by lifting his sleeve. Jiraiya made some hand signals while examining his shoulder. When he was done, he touched Gaara's seal with his middle and index fingers, and the seal began to change. Gaara winced in agony until the seal froze and stayed motionless. Gaara eyed his new seal and glanced up at Jiraiya in confusion. "I'm not entirely sure if I stopped Shukaku's voices, but I'm positive that you were able to sleep again. This is the best I can do, so if something bad happens, I guess I'll be the one to blame," he stated to Gaara. Gaara turned around after giving a nod. Gaara said incoherently, "Thank you. Now if you'll excuse me, I have much to think about." Naruto pondered what Gaara had to think about. Naruto had little time to consider that because Itachi showed up nearby. Naruto asked, perplexing Hinata and himself, Itachi, sensei?" With obvious fear, Hinata questioned, Itachi? As in Itachi Uchiha who murdered his clan. With a muttered curse, Naruto wished Itachi had not arrived. "Don't worry, Hinata. Hime, he's a good guy, I promise. It's a very complicated and long story." "So Itachi. Sensei, I thought you had to leave to do your mission?" replied Naruto. Hinata eased up a bit, but she remained alert. He said in a monotone, "I did and I am. I just thought that since you have a month to train, I might as well train you." "What's wrong with people's monotone voices?" Naruto pondered. Naruto put both of his arms around Hinata's waist and said, "That sounds great and all." With curious eyes, Hinata looked up at him and said, "But I'm not leaving. Not without Hinata-chan." Are you sure? I'll probably just hold you back." Naruto touched Hinata's lips with his finger. Naruto said, "No you wouldn't, trust me." Itachi informed them, "I'm not sure if that's a good idea." "Why not?" A somewhat irate Naruto inquired. "Because it'll be quite dangerous and she'll probably be safer if she stays here," Itachi replied. With no room for debate, Naruto told Itachi, "That's what I thought too, but today pretty much proved to me that it's never safe. I feel better if I knew that I was close to her." Itachi shut his eyes, then opened them again. Itachi scattered, and Naruto sighed. "I'll think about it. For now, I'll go back and see how far Kisame has gone." Jiraiya glanced at Hinata and then Naruto. The sun had disappeared when he turned to look behind him. "You know, kid, maybe we should go back to the hospital. They're probably looking for her right now," Jiraiya replied. After glancing at Hinata, Naruto turned to face Jiraiya. "Yeah, you're probably right." After that, the three of them vanished, and the silence fell over the area. Throughout Konoha, Gaara had been strolling around contemplating his role in the invasion. He came to a halt atop what Konoha referred to as Kikyo's castle. He thought the name was strange, but he was at a loss for words. He was beginning to consider informing Naruto about his father's plan to invade and destroy Konoha. Naruto appeared sincere and had the potential to be a very strong ally. Sand burst from Gaara's gourd and pounded a pillar behind him in the chilly night. Before the pillar could be demolished, a blur leapt out from behind it. When Gaara turned around, he saw Dosu standing opposite him, seemingly prepared for battle. Dosu ignored Gaara's warning. "I have no business with you. Now leave before I make your blood fall on my sand." Dosu cocked his fist back and ran at Gaara, saying, "So you're the major piece in Orochimaru. Sama's plan, huh? You don't look so tough to me." As the sand stopped Dosu in his tracks and engulfed him, Gaara uttered the words, "Looks can be deceiving." Panic set in, and Dosu's only visible eye widened. Dosu pleaded, "No, don't kill me. I can help you become stronger." Gaara refused to listen. "This is what happens when you get overconfident in your abilities." Gaara pointed to Dosu with his hand out, palm open, saying, "I warned you already to leave me alone and you refused." Then his sand obeyed, and his hand snapped shut. Sand coffin. Then, as the sand compressed and squeezed Dosu's life out, he exploded in a gory scene of organs and blood. Gaara loved how Dosu's blood felt on his sand. Now that his existence had been confirmed once more, he experienced a sudden sense of calm and excitement. Shukaku's voice screamed for more, but it was faint and quiet when Gaara heard it. With a smile on his face, Gaara resumed his stroll around Konoha. He found Temari reading a book and Kankuro sleeping loudly when he got back to the hotel where he and his siblings were staying. Temari was terrified when Gaara asked, "Shouldn't you be asleep?" She began, then stopped, saying, "Huh? Oh, yeah. Well, I found this book and..." She closed her book and laid it gently on the table she was sitting close to, saying, "Never mind, it's not important. I guess I'll go to sleep now." She got up and went to lie down on her bed. She covered herself with the covers and glanced at Gaara before turning around. "Good night," she said, and Gaara turned around after nodding. Silently, she said, "Little brother." But when Gaara heard her, he experienced an unidentified sensation in his stomach. The book his sister had just finished reading caught his attention. A picture of a girl sitting on the ground with her back against a wooden fence and a younger-looking boy sleeping next to her was featured on the front cover. As he quickly perused the book, he noticed a few more images featuring both a boy and a girl. A love story? Gaara asked herself. Gaara left the room and sat on the balcony directly outside their room when Temari woke up from her nap. He read the book's back, which contained a synopsis, and switched on the light outside. It said, "Abandoned at the ages of 12 and 16, Ichigo and Karen fight to make ends meet in a society where power and wealth are valued above all else. While Ichigo stays obliging to the outside world, 15-year-old Karen works 2 jobs. Karen's concern for her younger brother was growing. He was once kind and joyful, but ever since their parents left them 3 years ago, he has turned icy and heartless. She did everything she could to assist him, but he wouldn't accept it. Will she have to risk everything to get her younger brother back, or will she give up and let him remain passive?" Gaara opened the book to the first page and began reading after it suddenly sounded intriguing. Gaara was unable to put the book down after the first page. He continued reading the book until he became aware of the rising sun. After giving the book another glance, he resumed reading it. When he heard Temari getting up to use the restroom and Kankuro yawning, he was already more than halfway through the book. Gaara went back inside and put the book back where he had found it. Then a thought occurred to him, and he turned back to the book. What makes Temari want to read this book? As numerous other ideas came to him, he thought. As the sun shone down on him and Hinata, Naruto narrowed his eyes. He grinned as he saw the calm expression on the short-haired ninja's face. He gently brushed the loose strands of her black hair back behind her ear because some of it was in her face. Then he looked up and saw a flash go off. He noticed his mother grinning triumphantly while holding the same camera from the previous day. As Kushina liked to say, Konoha's cutest couple, appeared in another photo. She grinned. She hung up her camera and got serious. She said, "Come on Naruto, the meeting is in 5 minutes." Naruto became serious as well. He shook Hinata gently awake and nodded his head. He whispered in her ear, "Wake up Hinata-chan, we need to get ready." She said, 5 more minutes, and Naruto couldn't contain his laughter. He told her, "But 5 minutes is all we have." She turned her head away, attempting to fall back asleep, but Naruto heard a muffled, "Too bad," and was laughing once more. "Hinata-chan, come on, wake up." She shook her head this time, and Naruto sighed. "Okay, but don't say I didn't warn you." Hinata was going to ask him what he meant when Naruto began to tickle her, She laughed aloud and tried to back away, but each time she did, Naruto got closer. Hinata had gotten too close to the edge and nearly fell, but Naruto caught her, but her instincts made her hold on to Naruto as well, causing them both to fall to the ground. They were still under the covers, an inch apart, and, fortunately for Hinata, Naruto had moved quickly enough that she fell over him, landing softer than Naruto. They both looked at each other and grinned at the same time, and then another flash went off, making Kushina appear triumphant once more while Naruto's patience was beginning to wear thin. Kushina nodded and walked out of the room, saying, "Give us a minute, Mom. If you'll need me, I'll be outside." Naruto nodded and got to his feet, forcing Hinata to follow suit. When he noticed a sudden breeze, she blushed and abruptly grabbed the floor's covers and wrapped them around herself, a move that startled him until he realized why she would do it. "Well, what will I wear when I change?" Hinata asked, and Naruto reached out and picked up a bag that had been thrown toward Hinata. He turned to see Heishi standing next to her, looking very docile, but Naruto sensed some animosity from him, and he grinned and shrank his perspiration. Heishi simply arched an eyebrow when Naruto said, "Hey, I know what this looks like, but let me explain." Kushina then approached Hinata and Naruto and began shoving Naruto from the room, saying, "What are you doing, Mom?" Kushina stopped pushing him and smiled slyly at him, saying, "Hinata needs to change and she can't do that if you're in the room." She pointed at both of them and said, "Unless, it's okay with both of you." Hinata covered her mouth and shook her head, and Naruto shook his head as well. As she pushed Naruto out of the room once more, Heishi stood at the door, contemplating what had just transpired, and Kushina shoved him aside, saying, "I thought so." She looked back at Hinata and winked, saying, "I know you're her father, but a girl needs her privacy, Before Kushina closed the door, Hinata mouthed a thank you and giggled, then began stripping down once she was certain no one was watching. Heishi, who had heard of Kushina but did not necessarily believe that she was Naruto's mother, was observing her with interest outside her room. "So you're the mother of Naruto?" She hugged her son around the neck and nodded in response to his question. She ignored Naruto's, "Hey," and said proudly, "Yup, this little knucklehead is mine." Heishi nodded and sat down while he waited for his daughter to emerge. Normally, if Gaara slept, Shukaku would take over and destroy everything in sight and anything within his reach, but here he was, sleeping or meditating, and Shukaku was nowhere to be heard or seen. Gaara appeared to be sleeping because his breathing was calm and his eyes were closed. Tamari wasn't sure if he was sleeping or meditating. Tamari sat next to her younger brother and pulled out the book she had been reading since arriving in Konoha, which she had discovered lying under the bed she was sleeping on and was about to discard when she noticed the cover page. She was curious about how her brother, who had a one-tailed demon, was able to remain so calm, and she had not seen him this calm since. Tamari shrugged, not caring if it was the last time, just that it was happening. She would read the book whenever she wasn't training at her regular training location, and ever since she discovered it, Gaara had also appeared to take a particular interest in it. He may not have realized it, but she has. Because she was a ninja, she had an excellent memory and an eye for detail. Whenever she put the book down to sleep at night, it would always be in the same spot in the morning, though not exactly where she left it. She knew that Kankuro would never even consider picking it up because he was constantly checking on his puppets, and she had witnessed Baki pick it up once before putting it down and muttering something about useless books. Then she realized that either Gaara was reading the book or she was going crazy. Gaara opened his eyes and stood up before she could think anything else. Good sleep. It was funny that when she woke up that morning, she was shocked to see Gaara sleeping. At first, everyone was terrified, but if Shukaku hadn't taken over, everything would have been fine. However, Gaara didn't respond. Instead, he simply left the room and entered the hotel's kitchen in Konoha. Normally, that would be it, no more talking, no more fear, but because of the book, Tamari felt compelled to at least try to establish a connection with him. She got up and followed him into the kitchen, where she saw Gaara examining the refrigerator before approaching him and putting a hand on his shoulder to stop his sand from attacking Tamari's hand. Tamari did not recoil when he did this, and Gaara returned her glance with a kind smile. "This morning, little brother, how about I prepare your breakfast?" After giving it some thought, Gaara shrugged his shoulders and left the kitchen. Tamari sighed and went to prepare his breakfast, removing some bread, bacon, and eggs. When she was done, she came back into the living room and found Gaara sitting on his bed. She took a final breath and handed him his breakfast, which he accepted. Tamari grinned when he appeared to be happy with his meal. Gaara finished quickly, and he got up to put his plate away before returning to sit across from Tamari, who resumed reading her book as he ate. He gave her a suspicious look, and she felt uncomfortable. "Gaara, is there anything I can do to help?" Gaara took a moment to consider his response before responding. Gaara's tone was emotionless as he responded, "Why did you make me breakfast? You usually make sure you're well kept before you pay any attention to me. I just wanted to make sure you had a decent breakfast." "But why? Why are you suddenly concerned about my welfare?" he asked. "I don't know. I have always cared for you, even though you may not realize it," she replied coolly. "I guess I just thought I should finally do something." Gaara, who was able to read people well because he had to when everyone hated him, saw no signs of deceit in her body language or voice, and he nodded in agreement. "How do you feel about the invasion, Temari?" Temari wasn't expecting a question like that from Gaara, so she asked quietly, aware that someone might overhear them. Even though I really don't want to, I don't really have a choice. As the ninjas who work for Father, we must obey his commands whether we like him or not. Father is the case cage." "Why are you asking?" With genuine curiosity, she asked, and Gaara grunted after shaking his head. "I think it's useless. I am aware that Otto is here to support us, but Konoha appears to have some very powerful ninjas." Temari was shocked when Gaara responded, "Even though we have the element of surprise, I still feel like we will lose more than just the invasion." "It's intriguing what you said, Gaara. Given that you're going to slaughter a significant portion of Konoha and its inhabitants, I would have assumed you would be thrilled to join the invasion," Temari said. "As you said, I want to establish my existence, but I simply cannot do that if I murder children and weaklings." Temari laughed as Gaara defended, "I don't see the point in wasting my time with defenseless targets." "Gaara, you don't plan on defying Father, do you? I apologize if I offended you. I just thought you were starting to reconsider the whole invasion." She joked, but was taken aback by Gaara's uncertain expression. Slowly, she asked, "I'm not positive. I've had time over the past few days to reflect on my past deeds and future choices. I'm still involved in the invasion, but I'm not sure how long that will last," Gaara informed her. "What I just told you, Temari, was confidential. I anticipate that you won't tell Baki or anybody else." Gaara stood up and walked out of the room, warning, "Don't make me regret my decision." Temari stood motionless, still processing what her younger brother had said, but surprisingly, her thoughts weren't about his skepticism about the invasions. "He informed me that, in private, Kakashi, Kushina, Iruka, Heishi, and the third Hokage waited patiently as Naruto considered his next move while Hinata sat next to him, only because he had insisted she join him. No one under the rank of Chunin, other than Naruto, was permitted to attend the meeting, a matter of security. As the third referred to it, Naruto didn't want to share his story without his girlfriend, so he obstinately held on to Hinata until the third agreed, much to Hiashi's chagrin. The one thing that confused Naruto the most was Heishi. He recalled his first encounter with him, when he displayed very little emotion in front of an outsider, but he was cold and distant toward Hinata, which worried him and made him wonder how long he had been this way. Naruto, of all people, was aware of when someone was hiding their innermost feelings and desires, and he believed that Heishi was repressing a lot of feelings of regret, love, and happiness. It seemed to Naruto that since his wife passed away, he had tried to get rid of his old life and emotions by immersing himself in his work and expecting too much from Hinata, and was disappointed when she did not live up to his expectations. "What do I know? I'm no psychologist," Naruto sighed, mentally shrugging his shoulders. Then Naruto saw Kakashi give him a strange look he had never seen before, and while he was still upset with his sensei, he was also relieved that he still cared enough to come and listen to where he had been for the past 6 months. The third said, "Any time now, Naruto." Naruto nodded and began to share his story, bringing him out of his reverie. "Well, while coming back from getting my new swords, my mom and me were ambushed by Kumo Hunter Nins, and one of their jutsu knocked me out and blocked Kyuubi from talking to me. I don't think it was a good idea to bring up your prisoner in front of Hinata, Naruto." "Hold on?" Kushina inquired. Naruto glanced at Hinata and grinned upon seeing her smile. "She still wants to be with me," Naruto revealed, shocking everyone in the room. "She already knows. Isn't she wonderful?" he continued, causing Hinata to flush intensely. Naruto nodded and went on, saying, "Please continue, Naruto." "I recall waking up in a bed after that, as I mentioned." Everyone started to perspire when Naruto said, "I had amnesia at the time, so I did what anyone in my position would do. I went around the house, yelling in hopes that someone would discover me. I was knocked out again by a girl my age who showed up. She apologized the second time I woke up and said it was the only thing she could think of to stop me talking. I was in Kumo, she said, and her name was Nozomi. She then gave me a tour of the city and introduced me to a few of her friends. After several months, I was put on a team, accepted as a genin, and trained with my teammates whenever we weren't on missions. During that time, I kept having dreams of my old life, my life that I had here. Though I didn't really understand it at that time, I was slowly getting my memories back. 5 months after I first joined Kumo, I met Ero, Sennin. With the exception of the Hokage, everyone in the room was taken aback when Jiraiya interrupted, saying, "I told you not to call me that." "I told you no way," fired back Naruto. Jiraiya would have continued, but he realized something was wrong when he felt cold steel against his exposed skin. To his left, he noticed Kushina standing with a kunai in her hand and a sly smile on her face. In a phony, sweet voice that alarmed everyone in the room, Kushina said, "Well, if it isn't Master Jiraiya. My, how old you've grown." Jiraiya was unable to even swallow since the abrupt movement would cause his throat to come into contact with the kunai in Kushina's grasp. Hello there, Kushina. My, you look lovely today." Jiraiya returned the greeting, looking as anxious as the one time he was caught snooping around in the women's hot spring when it was crowded with kunoichi. Though he hoped he was mistaken, he had a theory as to why she was upset. In her lovely voice, she remarked, "I assume that you understand why I'm holding a kunai at your throat based on your nervousness." Jiraiya made an attempt to nod, but his range was constrained. "So you also know that we're going to need to talk about it later, right?" she asked, forcing him to follow her as she moved her kunai up and down his throat. She returned to her seat after putting the kunai away. "Good." As she rubbed his throat, Jiraiya suddenly realized how fortunate he was that the kunai was pointing at his throat rather than another valuable spot. "I met Ero, Sennin while he was doing his research and forced him to train me. It wasn't easy and required some persuasion on my part, but he agreed and trained me. One night, it dawned on me that I was from Konoha and that I was who I truly was, but that was also the night I was kidnapped and taken to a far-off place. You people need to stop interrupting me, it's getting annoying." They put me through a battery of tests, including psychological and blood tests, among others. It wasn't until I saw a clone of myself floating in a test tube next to me that I truly understood what was happening. I was apparently cloned by a mad scientist who was tampering with my DNA. I was told by the scientist how he managed to remove half of my chakra and insert it into the clone. When Naruto finished, Hinata noticed that he was keeping something from them. He explained, "Sometime later, I was forced to battle the clone while most of my chakra was drained. I killed it by blowing up the lab with it still inside. The only reason I am not dead is because I was able to escape at the last minute. Ero, Sennin found me and that is when I lost consciousness. I left, with Ero. Sennin, I trained some more and came back to Konoha. Yeah, that's about it." Naruto nodded in response to the Hokage's question, "Is that all?" Naruto nodded his head once more, asking, "Are you sure?" With a sigh, the third brushed everyone out of the room. The first person out was Naruto, then Hinata. Unexpectedly, Kakashi didn't pull out his book and appeared to be pouting over something, while Heishi departed silently. Kushina took Jiraiya by the collar before he could get away. With her eyes yelling for blood and her teeth clenched, Kushina exclaimed, "Where do you think you're going?" "We have a few things to discuss, Jiraiya, all of them including my poor, lonely son." Jiraiya swallowed, wondering how he had gotten himself into that predicament. Hinata attempted to halt Naruto's run, saying, "Naruto-kun, slow down." He was utterly silent and stopped walking without turning around. Hinata was beginning to feel uneasy because she had never seen him so silent. He didn't want to turn around and look at her. She took the initiative and positioned herself in front of Naruto, forcing him to turn to face her. Concerned, she said, "Naruto-kun, what's wrong? What is making you so upset?" He knew he couldn't help but respond to her as soon as he met her eyes. "I know you didn't tell the whole truth back there. You're hiding something and I don't like it when you hide things from me." She shifted her gaze as she spoke. She sadly remarked, "It makes me feel like you don't trust me." Naruto became active at once. Naruto paused, trying to figure out how he could accurately express his thoughts. "Hinata-chan, please don't think that. I trust out you with me life. It's just, come on, if I'm going to tell you, I want it to be in a secluded place, okay?" Hinata gave a nod. She said, "See. Can we go to my house?" Despite thinking it was an odd question to ask, Naruto nodded. She guided him to her house while holding his hand. The Hyuga guards nodded and gave them a look when they arrived. After returning the nod, Naruto entered Hinata's home. She escorted him into her room and through the corridors. Considering that Hinata lived in a home filled with pricey possessions, her room was rather basic. On one side of the room was her bed, on the other was her desk, and next to the window was a little futon. She didn't have much, just a few picture frames. Naruto surveyed her room once more before Hinata motioned for him to take a seat beside her on her bed. He took a seat, sighed, and started to share the portion of his story that he had omitted. Flashback. When Naruto awoke for the third time, he discovered that he was still pinned to the wall, just as he had been an hour before. He fought through his chains, but he was weak and exhausted from all the tests and medications he had received. He caught a glimpse of someone looking at the computer and writing something down out of the corner of his eye. Naruto could only tell that the person was short because they were in the shadows and he couldn't see who they were. While Naruto stared in bewilderment, the individual appeared to have figured something out and laughed. He looked directly at Naruto as he turned his head. The individual put down his notes and approached Naruto with a smile. In a deep, weary voice, the person said, "So you're awake, huh? It's been a while since the last time you've woken up." Naruto, exhausted, yelled, "Who are you? And what do you want?" When the figure eventually emerged from the shadows, Naruto's eyes grew wide. No way. You're that guy from 7 years ago." Jiro grinned and appreciated the terror in Naruto's eyes. Jiro shocked Naruto once more by saying, "Yes, I am. I am Jiro and you are the Jinchuriki for Kyuubi." Jiro nodded, his sick smile unwavering. "Why, you know?" Jiro retreated into the shadows to retrieve his notes. "Yes, and it was only with the demon's assistance that you were able to defeat me and my partner. However, the past is irrelevant as long as we move forward into the future. Therefore, I will now get my revenge for what you did." Naruto was about to scream once more when he became aware of something that bothered him. A blonde-haired child of his age was floating in a containment chamber of some sort, naked, and that was just the start. There was a symbol in his stomach, the same one he always saw when he called forth his chakra. Additionally, a tiny bit of Kyuubi's chakra was encircling him. Although it wasn't much, it was sufficient to be noticeable. Gritting his teeth, Naruto attempted to free himself from the restraints of his chains once more. With a laugh as a response, Naruto screamed, "How dare you take one of your own ninjas and use him for experiments? And why use Kyuubi's chakra? It's poisonous to others. This kid will die in a matter of hours." "Shut up. You think I don't know that? I tried using Kyuubi's chakra on one of our ninjas but he ended up dying in minutes. Haro didn't stand a chance. The experiment was proved fatal and fruitless," Jiro stated to Naruto. Naruto questioned, "Why do you keep trying if you know it's pointless?" "I try because I know this one won't die." Jiro's smile turned into a crazy one as he replied, "And what makes you so sure?" Naruto said, "Because this kid is not human," and eased his grip on his chains. "Yes, the boy you see in that container is not human. He was made from your generous donations of blood, hair, skin and Kyuubi's chakra. It was very interesting to see how the boy's entire structure was formed from the help of Kyuubi's chakra. It might have taken some time and help but finally, my work is complete." Jiro was hysterical and Naruto was. Naruto watched in horror as his clone began to wake up and slowly opened his eyes, and with the amount of chakra he absorbed from you, the clone will be powerful enough to gain 2 or 3 tails. Naruto's eyes widened. He fell to the ground as the clone exploded through the glass. After a few seconds, the clone rose to his feet, and his blonde hair began to turn completely black, then a clear silver. Interesting. The particles in his hair seemed to interact with the oxygen particles in the air. But it is not important, Jiro stated as he faced Naruto. The clone's eyes sparked as he glanced at Naruto as well. The clone grinned in a manner reminiscent of Naruto's whenever he had a cheeky idea. Takeo immediately sprang into action, vanishing and then reappearing in front of Naruto, where he delivered a scathing punch to the stomach. I will name Takeo since that is the alias Naruto had, and you will fight Naruto. To the death. I'll finally get revenge on you, and when you're out of the picture, Takeo will abduct the Hyuga girl and Kumo will finally adujutsu. The pressure caused Naruto's ribs to crack, and he gasped in agony. He could hear the wall cracking behind him. As the wall and Naruto's ribs cracked once more, Takeo retracted his other fist and sent it toward them. Jiro demanded that Takeo stop, but Takeo deliberately ignored him and carried on the attack. Takeo turned to face his creator after delivering a final blow that sent Naruto through the wall and freed him. Jiro shouted, but Takeo's face was unreadable. "I told you to stop. You just destroyed that wall and in the process, some of the equipment. I'll give you a chance to kill him but not here." As Takeo's hands spontaneously went through hand signs and then held an open palm facing Jiro, a tremendous amount of chakra was suddenly focused on them. Water and fire suddenly began to spiral around Takeo's open hand. When he shut it, the water and fire rushed straight into Jiro, killing him and destroying the room's equipment. Naruto stumbled to his feet as he crawled into the open area outside the secret building. He was astounded by Takeo's strength. It was unreal. It was a miracle in and of itself that he managed to crawl out of the building before Takeo launched the attack. Scalpels and needles flew at Naruto from inside the building, and he fell to the ground. Naruto turned to see Takeo, who was wearing a lab coat that concealed his nude body, grinning at him. Naruto and Takeo kept staring at one another while the wind blew. Unsheathing both of Naruto's swords, Takeo shifted to his right leg. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he watched Takeo fling his swords into the air and catch them by the tip blade. Takeo threw a single sword directly at Naruto without spilling any blood in his hands. Rolling onto his side, Naruto evaded the sword that nearly severed his head. With the aid of his sword, he rose once more and grasped it. Takeo ran frantically for him as he gasped for air. Naruto raised his sword and deflected Takeo's blow. Naruto dropped to his knees as Takeo grinned and applied more pressure. After summoning some strength, Naruto got to his feet and shoved Takeo away. Naruto attempted to hit Takeo with a vertical arc, but Takeo flipped back. Naruto was constantly irritated by Takeo's grating smile. Takeo then increased his chakra level, and Naruto felt as though everything had suddenly become heavy. He was having problems breathing and his vision became static. His level of chakra. As he knelt down, Naruto thought, "It's amazing." He saw Takeo coming toward him, so he squinted his left eye and braced himself with his sword. "Why are you weak?" "I'm not weak and I came from you. Or are you too afraid to fight me?" laughed Takeo. Since Naruto knew Takeo's attempt would fail, he refrained from becoming enraged. Naruto sensed a deeper meaning in Takeo's words. "Not going to fight? Fine, it'll be easier for me to kill you and take what's yours." "What do you mean?" asked Naruto cautiously. "Like these swords for starters, and when I take your place in the Chunin exams, I'll go to Konoha and take what belongs to you, Hinata. It'll be so fun to finally be able to see her and make her my mate." "Leave Hinata out of this, she has nothing to do with you," said Naruto. Naruto clenched his teeth and raised his sword high in the air, saying, "Oh, but that's the thing. Being a clone of yours, I have all your memories and feelings. While you may feel actual love for Hinata, I just feel a lot of lust that you've been suppressing for her, and I'll be able to fulfill these feelings after I destroy you." He pressed Kyuubi's chakra against the blade with what little chakra he could feel. Demon Art. Slicing Chakra Invocation. Takeo was approached by the chakra as it rushed off the blade. In order to match Naruto's attack, Takeo's own sword ignited with Kyuubi's chakra and swiped it. Because Takeo's attack was so powerful, it sliced through Naruto's jutsu and headed directly for him. Naruto felt Takeo's jutsu backlash and leapt out of the way. Naruto lost his sword and flew across the field due to the after force. Though he was unable to even raise his upper body, Naruto willed his body to stand. "Do you have anything else to offer?" Takeo, however, was unfazed by Naruto's icy gaze, which was filled with enough hatred to freeze hell over. Naruto muttered, "I can beat the crap out of you. Then get up and battle me." When Takeo repressed his chakra, Naruto flinched and stood back up. "After you remove your mask." "He knows about that too," Naruto thought as he started to take off his mask, but as he looked to his left, he noticed Takeo's smile falter for a moment before it returned and he waved at Naruto. Takeo walked over to retrieve the other sword, straightened up, and turned back to Naruto, saying, "It seems we do not have time to play Naruto, but I swear that I will destroy you and take Hinata away from you." A human-sized toad leapt in front of Naruto, and Jiraiya appeared on top of it, grinning slightly. "And I can assure I will complete this promise because it is also my ninja way." Takeo disappeared into thin air. "You need help, child?" Naruto's final conscious thought was of Takeo's words as he felt dizzy and dropped his head to the floor. "I will take Hinata from you and destroy you." Flashback end. In the meantime, Hinata was thinking about how strange it had suddenly become. She knew that Takeo was strange and that he reminded her of Naruto, and now she knew why. It was even more shocking that the person who had attempted to kidnap her 7 years prior was behind the entire ordeal. Hinata remained silent throughout his entire explanation, and when he finished, she was stunned and he wondered what was going through her mind. "Hinata-chan? Are you present?" She caught Naruto's hand and stopped it as he waved it in front of her face. "Yeah, it's simply." After responding, Hinata turned to face Naruto and said, "This is very important information that should be told to the Hokage, Naruto-kun. It's a lot to take in right now. How come you didn't tell him?" Hinata inquired. "Well, since he was powerless to stop it. Jiro's experiments were not Kumo's fault, and he cannot halt the tests due to a single clone. Otherwise, the daimyo would be disappointed, and Konoha would lose a lot of its respect." Naruto assured her that he would carry out his promise, saying, "I know what I'm doing, Hinata-chan, and I'm going to be the one to settle this. Still, I think the Hokage should know. It's not that important, and it's too late now." Naruto stood up and said, "You need to pack up right now." Hinata gave him a questioning look and watched him make his way to her window. But why wait? Naruto turned to look at her as she asked. It felt strange to have Hinata give him that look, because you're coming with me when Itachi Sensei comes to get me to train. Hinata simply stared at him incredulously. Hinata reminded him, but Itachi said I couldn't come. Naruto shrugged his shoulders. And I said that unless you accompany us, I wouldn't go. Naruto said obstinately, as long as Takeo is alive, I won't leave you alone. Naruto.kun refused to listen to Hinata's words. I'm glad that you care, but I don't want to be the reason why you don't get stronger. Hinata had one final argument with Naruto, who responded, you won't be because you will come with me. But what if I'm the reason Itachi doesn't take you? With a sigh, Naruto returned to Hinata's location. I won't accompany him then. Before I leave to learn 1 or 2 jutsu with Itachi Sensei, I would prefer to stay here and make sure you're safe. I promise you, Hinata, that I will gain strength and ensure your safety from Takeo to anything else, whether or not I choose to accompany Itachi Sensei. As the girl that she was, Hinata blushed at Naruto's kiss on her hand, which he said, I will always be there for you, to protect you, or to support you, whichever one is necessary. Furthermore, Itachi Sensei lacks personality and occasionally becomes dull. So that you can pack, could we kindly drop it? Naruto smiled as he made his way to the window, but Hinata stopped him when he remembered something. Hinata nodded and giggled. Wait, Naruto.kun. Naruto had just been able to leave the window when he heard his name called. He turned to face Hinata, who was grinning at him and holding the doorknob to her closet, and said, there's probably someone who'll want to see you. When Hinata opened her closet and Naruto noticed that Miu was sleeping in a makeshift bed, Miu looked up exhaustedly and saw Naruto, which caused her to get up and run to him. Before Naruto could react, Miu leapt onto his chest, and using her speed and momentum, she forced him back, causing him to fall freely to the ground. With a loud thud, Naruto hit the ground, and Miu licked his cheeks relentlessly. Despite the pain of his fall, Naruto was happy to see Miu again, as she was one of the few people and things he missed while he was away. Hinata laughed when she saw Miu get off Naruto and begin to circle him. At midnight, when nobody was moving and the moon shone brightly over Konoha, 2 shadows on top of the Hokage's monument moved quickly over the heads of the previous Hokages before stopping atop the fort's head and waiting for someone to show up. Hinata said gravely, I still think you won't let me come. Naruto stepped forward to face her, lifting her chin as her light lavender eyes met Naruto's blue ones. But I'm sure I can't leave you behind. Now calm down. Telling him that I won't leave without you won't cause him to overreact. She felt shivers down her spine and couldn't help but smile as Naruto reassured her and kissed her quickly. Naruto always made her feel good, no matter what. He can be a very understanding guy. Naruto noticed Itachi waiting for him across the room. So, will you allow Hinata to join us, or are you still opposed to it? Itachi shook his head sideways in response to Naruto's question. After being offended by Itachi's remarks, Hinata felt Naruto put his arm around her shoulders and said, sorry Naruto, but I can't allow her to come, she'll only slow you down. Well that's too bad because like I said, I'm not going unless she does too. Naruto shook his head despite Itachi's explanation that, you're not strong enough to deal with what is to come ahead, and if you want to survive and protect her as well, you might want to reconsider your decision. However, what if I leave and that Teme chooses to harm Hinata once more or worse? If the sole purpose of strengthening isn't to protect me, then there would be no use in doing so, Naruto shot back. So you're defying a directive straight from your boss? Itachi inquired. As Hinata watched, she sensed that the conversation was about to take a turn for the worse. Yes, I am. Itachi shook his head in disappointment. Naruto barely managed to push Hinata aside before Itachi threw a kunai at them before he vanished again, saying, such an act is considered treasonous and you know what happens to those who are guilty of treason. Naruto looked up and saw Itachi moving within his cloak, knowing he was preparing to throw another kunai, before he vanished once more and hurried to Hinata's side. Holding his kunai just above Naruto's heart, Itachi concluded, they are sentenced to death. What the devil?
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.